Hello there, everyone. Welcome back to another Road Dodgers Politics stream. I hope everyone is keeping safe in the snowy weather out there today. If you're watching from the UK, um, hopefully it's starting to melt a bit now, but we'll see how it goes. But so today I wanted to do a stream about the three Brexit speeches that happened this week. One on Monday by Mr. Jeremy Corbyn. Another one on Wednesday by John Major, the formative Tory party PM in the early 90s. And finally, Theresa May, obviously the Prime Minister now, made her Brexit speech that was scheduled. It was originally meant to be in Newcastle, but because of the snow, it was set up in Mansion House. So that was um, basically a lot to talk about. Um, quite a mixed bag of feedback from that speech. Many people said that it offered a bit more clarity as to her position on where Brexit was headed and what her party in particular wanted it to look like in terms of trade and how close we wanted to be in terms of relationship with the EU. So I'll go into that a bit later. Um, so yeah, a mixed bag and a week full of speeches. So first off, let's not start with Jeremy Corbyn. Now, he started off the week on Monday. Basically, the main premise of his speech was to stay in a form of a customs union because I think he's primarily more concerned with um, the Irish border problem and the Good Friday Agreement because he said that he didn't want to risk any sort of lasting negative impact with that. Um, so yeah, I think that was quite a good speech. I think it's quite pragmatic in terms of what he wanted in terms of trade with the European Union, and it certainly sort of appeased a lot of the Remainer Labour supporters who voted for him because they wanted a softer sort of Brexit that sort of didn't want to do too much damage. He talked a lot about jobs and manufacturing and wanting to keep, industries, especially like the car industries in the UK, and not have to cross borders too many times and not have to face customs checks, etc. So that's why, a form of a customs union was the basis of his argument, which is fair. I mean, like, I'm quite supportive of Corbyn, as many people will know. So I think, yeah, overall it was quite a good speech. And then on Wednesday we had a speech from John Major, who pretty much is a he's a massive Europhile. So like he made a speech basically talking about how it was a massive bad idea what we've been doing over the past 20 months, and to leave the EU would mean that we'd be poorer, our economy would decrease, and everything would sort of be not very good. And so what what he was basically talking about was he didn't. I'm no Tory. I'm not a fan of like people in the Tory party, let alone John Major, but I respected him on the basis that he wore his heart on his sleeve, talking about why this is such a disaster and that we should have well, Parliament should be allowed to have a decision on the final deal of Brexit when it happens. Um, so which I think that's quite pragmatic. I think um obviously he got a lot of backlash from like extreme Brexiters like Jacob Rees-Mogg for saying what he said. Um, but I think he spoke very passionately and eloquently about what he believed in and why the road we are going down is really not a good one. Um, and it's sort of basically just saying that we're as a country we're being led to the slaughter by a government that is sort of being kowtowed by a small group of Eurosceptics. Um, and I know he said like I remember he said on Wednesday it was like he didn't want to be there making a speech. I mean, it goes against all of his better judgments to be talking about going out on a platform and going against his party, going against the prime minister. So I take no pleasure in speaking out today, but I think I feel like he felt like he had to. So I mean, props to anyone who like when you disagree, you just have to say it. Like I disagree, and I think this is a really bad direction for the country. So um, he also took into account the Northern Ireland peace agreement, which is you know obviously a massive problem at the moment. And I don't think any party, I mean, I think the party that's gotten closest to trying to solve the problem of of Northern Ireland is the Labour Party, who have said that they want to try and arrange some form of customs union with the EU. Um, so yeah, I think um, yeah, I think Labour's sort of got the best speech so far. But moving on to Theresa May's speech that happened yesterday. This is the big hitter. Um, so let's have a look at Theresa May's speech. So a lot of critics were sort of expecting this to like not obviously answer all the questions because Theresa May has not been the best at sort of putting her points out there and being sort of you know saying exactly what she wants and explaining the ins and outs and methods and how it's going to be done and such like um but I think she got half of the way there. I think she 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 began with addressing the fact that we um we have to look at some hard truths about what we're not going to do. So we're not, for example, we're not going to stay in the single market and we're not going to be in a customs union. So in effect, we're going to leave the EU, which she's been parroting for quite a while. Um, but then she also conceded that our access to the single market would be considerably less, and that we would have to pay into some agencies as a result of leaving, which that is a concession, and I think it's sort of saying that she's stepping into the reality of what Brexit really means, rather than, as a lot of commentators have been saying, having your cake and eating it. There's been a lot of cake metaphors blowing around the news for the past 20 months, that and cherry picking. So yeah, we'll look further into that. So the main points that she made, the main sticking points was how our relationship would sort of in some ways stay the same and in some ways be different. So key trade proposals would be so for example, banks that are located in London would lose the right to trade across the EU, and so lose their sort of passporting system, and then that system would be replaced by a new system. Secondly, she talked about staying in retaining membership of several different industry agencies. So, example, the European Medicines Agency, and also chemical and aviation agencies, and make sort of financial contributions there. Also, she talked about Parliament reserving the right to pass its own regulations in these areas, but knowing that. Oh, sorry, guys, just 1 second. Oh, sorry about that, guys. So where was I? Parliament would reserve the right to basically pass its own regulations in-house. Also having a participating in science, education, and cultural programs, such as having a relationship with Euratom. So, I mean, she made a big deal about us maintaining really close alliances and relationships with all these different European agencies. Also mentioning about the European Court of Justice, sort of having a sort of cherry picking system where we could sort of mirror those laws, but then also do our own laws when and as and when that we wanted to. So in that vein, let's carry on. So UK to explore continued participation in EU's internal energy market while protecting single energy market on the island of Ireland. Also, fairer deal for UK fishermen based on reciprocal access to waters and shared stocks management. Mutual recognition of broadcasting rules to allow UK channels to continue to be seen in Europe. That sounds fair. Ensure continuity of rail, maritime, and aviation services and of Hawley's access to European markets, and keeping UK regulatory standards as high as the EU's to ensure smooth trade. And while UK law may not be identical to EU law, it should achieve the same outcomes. This last point is quite interesting because it's basically it's replicating and almost mirroring EU law and UK law as sort of the same sort of thing. If it's almost exactly the same, and it's just, I feel like the UK is sort of coming to this sort of approach where we are wanting to cherry pick the best bits, sort of like a pick and mix of like the best things that you want, and then dropping the bits that you don't want. And Theresa May in her speech was saying like, we understand that no one can get everything that they want out of this, and we have to compromise, which is understandable, and it is sort of trying to come out of the delusion of like, let's have our cake and eat it, and we can get everything that we want, because obviously we can't. And that's a big thing with Northern Ireland as well. I mean, if you're leaving the EU, you have to leave the customs union. And by leaving the customs union, you're effectively creating a hard border with Northern Ireland. And if that can't be resolved, then I mean, there were talks about have it like the EU suggested in a commission draft this week that if no solution can be found, then a border will have to exist in the Irish Sea so as to prevent a hard border with Northern Ireland. So effectively, that would mean uniting Ireland in terms of creating frictionless trade between the island of Ireland and Northern Ireland. So, I mean, in some ways, she's still a bit all over the place, because it did offer some clarity and some sort of insight into what the government wanted. I mean, it showed that she was willing to compromise, and she was willing to sacrifice sort of access to different trade markets, but at the same time, sort of acknowledging that we would not be seeing benefits of obviously being in the EU. And she is a Remainer, and she's having to sort this whole thing out. And I feel like for a long time she's been under the thumb of a group of like extreme Brexit people in Parliament. So people like Jacob Rees-Mogg and John Redwood and Boris Johnson, all of these quite strong characters who are really being quite influential in getting their voices across in the media, which is creating quite a lot of conflict. So yeah, that was basically her speech. So what was the Labour reaction to this? So, I mean, so I've got a BBC article up here saying Jeremy Corbyn's reaction after 20 wasted months, Theresa May has once again failed to bring real clarity to negotiations, and worryingly, she admitted that her approach will reduce our access to European markets. She read out a long list of problems, but failed to provide solutions, particularly on the urgent question of preventing a hard border in Northern Ireland. I mean, that's a good point, because she did talk about Northern Ireland and said, she said what she didn't want to happen. So, for example, we want as frictionless trade with Northern Ireland with the border as possible, and we don't want a border in the Irish Sea because that would effectively endanger the constitutional union of the UK. So, like splitting up of the union, for example, like which is what they don't want, and neither do the DUP. Which are at the moment still attached to the Tory government that we've got. So I think Corbyn raises a good point there by saying that she didn't really offer any specific solutions to the Irish problem. Because by leaving the customs union, I mean, what other solution is there really? Excuse me. So attacking Mrs. May's suggestion the UK could stick closely to EU state aid rules, he added, Theresa May's only clear priority today seemed to be to tie the UK permanently to EU rules, which are used to drive privatisation and block support for the British industry. So yeah, we've got a lot of analysis there, and a European civil servant said recently that Brexit was a fascinating intellectual exercise in rebuilding the existing elements of the UK-EU relationship with Britain, effectively out of the club. So she also went on to say that she sort of rejected the possibility of having a Norway or Canada type style deal, a so-called off-the-shelf model, and said, so she said the Prime Minister called for a free trade agreement covering most sectors of the economy, going further than the deal signed between Canada and the EU, but stopping short of Norway, which was a member of the EEA, the European Economic Area. She said, we need to strike a new balance, but we will not accept the rights of Canada and the obligations of Norway. So, for example, Norway, which is in the EEA, which means that effectively they have access to the single market, except we don't want to be in the single market. We want to be outside of it. So we can't have that, apparently. So what they're effectively saying is we want to create a bespoke deal, especially for Britain, as a part of leaving the EU, which, I mean, I don't know how to feel about this, because I still feel like it's a lot of cherry picking and, as I said, picking the best bits of what you want, and thus creating like the closest possible relationship, which is like a good thing. But at the same time, if where you want to go is to entirely leave the whole European Union bloc, but still have the same laws and same regulations, if not higher, you're effectively staying in the EU as a whole. And I just think, why are we doing this? It's just such a massive, colossal waste of time and money as well. And I think a lot of people's feet are being held to the fire as well. Um, so I just really think that this should end up. I want it to be like a cross-party thing as opposed to just a government thing, which was just it was discussed like months ago that Brexit should be a cross-party discussion as opposed to just something that the government deals with. Um, oh, hi Ian in the chat. Hello. It says Corbyn is neutralized. I still think he's quite he's still a player in the game, and I think by making his speech that he did on Monday, I think he actually played it pretty well in suggesting we could be part of some form of customs union, so i.e. still having some sort of trade arrangement with the rest of the EU. So therefore you're sort of trying to protect Northern Ireland in a sense. But I'd love to see like a sort of further explanation of that and how that would work, because it wouldn't be the customs union as part of the EU. It would sort of, I'm guessing it would be like a bespoke sort of customs union that would just specifically be for us and therefore keep Northern Ireland as a part of the UK. So cherry picking. Oh wait, let's talk about the Irish border. So again, she talked on Friday about how a hard Irish border or a border between Northern Ireland and the rest of the UK would be unacceptable, and said it was for the UK and EU to work together on a solution. Yes, I mean that would be ideal, wouldn't it? Because I mean, I think the EU has offered up a lot of solutions, and like I think it's up to the UK because we effectively created this problem, didn't we? We like, well, I didn't, but 52% of the voting public created this problem. And yes, it is a problem. I'm going to be honest. It's created nothing but a chaos and just conflict and bitterness, and especially in the media. Um, but I do think that it's a good idea for everyone to work together. So I think she was right about that. She suggested this could be either a customs partnership where the UK, as I have been talking about, mirrors EU requirements on goods from around the world, or a streamlined customs arrangement using technology and trusted trader schemes to do away with the needs for customs checks. I mean, technology is another thing. I think if you're going to be talking about technology, at the same, like how specifically would that work, especially with customs borders and that, like also as well, will I think she also talked about leaving the digital single market. I mean, how will, if you're leaving a digital single market yet wanting to embrace technology on things like borders, how will that work? It's so frustrating trying. It's like trying to get blood out of stone with Theresa May. Like I just wish you'd go into more detail about how things would work. Because I mean there are hundreds of checkpoints on the Northern Irish border, and just using the work phrase using technology and trusted trader schemes, like how would that work? How would it work? So let's move on. Cherry picking. Amid criticism from UK that the UK was attempting to cherry pick the best parts of the bloc's rules, she said The fact is that every free trade agreement has varying market access depending on the respective interests of the countries involved. I mean, yeah, that's true. I mean, you could use Canada's trade deal as an example, and also Norway as well, and Japan and South Korea. I think she mentioned as well. Those are all quite bespoke trade deals. So in a sense, I think, I mean, I understand where she's coming from. She's trying to be as realistic as possible, but I think there were still quite a few platitudes thrown into that speech where it was just sort of phrases and sort of buzzwords um, that didn't really speak volumes for me as a person. So if this is cherry picking, then every trade arrangement is cherry picking. So then there you go. That's pretty much saying, well, I want a bespoke trade deal EU, so let's come and talk about it. And then she did say, let's get on with it, she says. Um, so the speech got a positive reaction from Brexit backing cabinet ministers, with Foreign Secretary Boris Johnson tweeting, "We will remain extremely close to our EU friends and partners, but able to innovate, to set our own agenda, to make our own laws, and to do ambitious free trade deals around the world." But pro-European Tory rebel Anna Soubry told the BBC that Leave voters would be right to question what was in it for them. Okay. So what was the reaction from Brussels? The EU's chief Brexit negotiator, Michel Barnier, welcomed the speech, saying it provided clarity about the UK leaving the single market and the customs union, and a recognition that trade-offs would inform future talks on a deal. So yeah, compromises and concessions will have to be made. And again, not everyone is able to get what they want, which is true. And for the last 20 or so months, I think the UK has been acting like we can get everything that we want, and if you don't give us what we want, then we won't give you the money that we have arranged to give you that was arranged last December. So the European Parliament's Brexit coordinator, Guy Verhofstadt, was not impressed. He said Theresa May needed to move beyond vague aspirations. We can only hope that serious proposals have been put in the post. So again, this is what I was afraid of. I said in another stream, this week, that I was hoping that this particular speech would lay out specifics and detail of exactly what it was that the UK was after in terms of a trade deal with the EU. But I mean, I was sat watching it, and for the most part, it's just, I feel like it's just a lot of empty rhetoric of, here's what I want to have, and we can do this, this, and this, and well, we're going to lay out some bits of what we want. I mean, some of it was, I mean, she laid out a lot of key points of what she wanted, and some of them was quite specific, which I applaud. But at the same time, it was sort of like a speech of two halves, where half of it was sort of semi-detailed, and then the next half was just a sort of platitudes of, well, here's some hard truths, and we realize not everyone can get exactly what they want all of the time, but at the same time, we want to cherry pick because we want a free tech trade deal, and this, that, and the other. So let's get on with it, and all of this stuff. But I just wish that there was a lot more clarity, in terms of her speeches, and especially from her other party members. Oh my god, it's so frustrating. Asking questions to Conservative MPs after this sort of event happens, and you ask questions and you ask specifics of oh, can I ask what is it that you actually want out of Brexit, and can you give us some details of where you're going with this and how you want the EU to react. And it's really just, they don't give any hard detailed facts or specifics at all. And oh my life, it's so frustrating because they just sort of parrot and echo, and they don't give their own opinion, and that they're not sort of critical. I mean, they just seem to toe the party line, and for me, that's very just it's so frustrating to to. Uh, I feel like Labour are a lot better at dealing with answering questions than the Tory party are. I think partly because they're not in government, so they don't really have to um they're not under the same sort of scrutiny. Um, but at the same time, I do feel like they are able to answer questions a lot better, especially people like Keir Starmer, who actually has relevant experience in sort of lawyer and like barrister law sort of experience. Um, so yeah, I'm gonna throw the link out for anyone who wants to join the stream. I'm not sure if um it'll work in the Hangout in the side chat. But we'll see anyway. And if not, I'll put it out on my Twitter. So here you go, guys. So nuts. So yeah, I'm just gonna tweet the Hangout link for anyone that would like to join. Just give me a moment. I'm just gonna mute myself very quickly until I do this. So just talk amongst yourselves for a minute. Okay, I'm back. So I'm gonna read some of your comments in the side chat now, because I realize that a few people have joined in the chat. So Ian S says hello. Um, says May turn out canny move having Theresa May up front as she is ego disarming face saving. Miles in the chat says nothing is agreed until everything is agreed. Yeah, definitely. Like that's another platitude that's been going around, and also no deal is better than a bad deal. Um, Ian says Guy Verhofstadt looks like a crazed maniac. um, well, each to their own, I guess. So yeah. Um, so yeah, what do you guys reckon to this week of speeches? We've had Jeremy Corbyn, John Major, and Theresa May all setting out their goals for what they want this sort of EU trade deal to look like. I mean, I really don't know where this is going to go, to be honest, guys, because I mean, we don't really hear much in terms of what goes on in the negotiations, do we? I mean, all we hear about is sort of what we want to happen, what different people would like to happen in terms of bespoke trade deals, cherry picking, um, having cake and eat it, a lot of these sorts of metaphors. Um, but I don't know, like it's sort of hard to see where it's going, especially in light of this issue of the Irish border, which I think like over the past few like 20 months or so, like even during the referendum, like not a lot of people paid any attention to, like as if it wasn't um an important thing. Which it absolutely is. I mean, like it's almost as if some people in the sort of Brexit sphere would like to sort of bypass the whole Good Friday Agreement altogether and put put Ireland like throw Ireland under the bus just so that we could get just so we could get a Brexit that you know the Tory party and the Brexiteers want. And I think that's just no way how to go about doing things at all. So I just and also like the idea of democracy as well, like the people are saying like, oh well, it's not democratic if we go against the will of the people, quote unquote, the will of the people. Um, Hi James in the chat, by the way. Um, th- I just I can't with that phrase, the will of the people. I mean, people saying like people like Jacob Rees-Mogg and his ilk saying that, oh, we're going against it's not democratic if we go against what people voted for and people will be angry, but at the same time like the whole point of democracy is to discuss things and go over things, and it's fine to change your mind. It's not treason. You're not an enemy of the people if you are talking like on the other side of the fence, if you've got another opinion, if you think something is wrong and you want to speak up about it. That's exactly what John Major did on Wednesday. He thought something was wrong. He thought what his party was doing was not a great thing to do, and he spoke up about it. And now he's getting backlash by people such as Jacob Rees-Mogg. In fact, I've got a quote from Jacob Rees-Mogg actually, which I will read out because I think it's quite an exceptional quote. Um, about talking about John Major. Um, so Jacob Rees-Mogg, raised in a country estate, schooled at Eton and Oxford, practically inherited a job as an investment banker, and has a net worth of well over 100 million. He has the audacity to call John Major the European elite, quote unquote, a man who was raised on a council estate and left school at 16 with just 3 O levels before going on to become prime minister. How can you have the gore? Like that's fact. Like he was raised in Brixton, and he worked at the like London Electricity Board, and left school with just 3 GCSEs, and like how on earth like Jacob Rees-Mogg? Just think of that man, like his entitledness and like his upbringing and how he speaks, and he is the son of a um, newspaper editor. I forget which one. It might have been the Times. Like a huge media mogul, and he has the gall to say that John Major is part of the European elite. What does that mean? Does an elite suddenly mean like a just makes you a clever person? Because like if that's the case, then maybe I'm an elite as well. But yeah, it's just ridiculous how this rhetoric is getting bandied about. I think it's just ridiculous. I mean, if I'm no Tory, but John Major, like, I respect him for saying what he said. Um, So, and I just think that people on both sides, like if you're a left winger or a right winger, just like listen to what people have to say, and if you agree with it, great, and if you don't agree with it, fine, you can disagree with it and you can criticize, but for God's sake, don't attack people and don't say things that are untrue about them just because you don't like what they're saying. And that's a lot to do with like what the media are doing as well. Like the last couple of weeks, with the Corbyn smear campaign, um, which is just was completely dragging Jeremy Corbyn through the dirt, like just endlessly, like every single day. The Mail and the Telegraph and the Sun just calling him a spy, a communist, a Marxist, a traitor of the country, all the rest of it. It's like, mate, like I understand that you're part of this Tory right wing agenda where you want to keep the power and the establishment and all the rest of it, but like you're dangerously in the sort of like the libel area where like who was it? Ben Bradley. Was it Ben Bradley who got asked to take a tweet down because he had accused Jeremy Corbyn of being a spy for like a Czech person. Um but yeah, it's dangerous, isn't it? It really is dangerous. And just yeah, if you disagree with someone, just fine, disagree with it and challenge it, but don't be spreading, nasty, libelous, bitter rhetoric, or because you disagree with someone, because all that's going to do is spread more hatred and more division across the whole country. And like, we don't need any more of that, do we? I think we've had quite enough. Um, so I'm going to read out a couple of comments. James has joined the chat, so hello, James. Great speech by May yesterday, uniting the Remainers and Leavers in her party for now. Yeah, I reckon that's true. I think that she has managed to appease um, both Remainers and Leavers. Remainers by saying that we're going to try and retain as like a closer relationship as humanly possible by being a part of all these different agencies and paying into being membership of them, so that we don't have to sort of keep creating new things just for us. And also pleasing Brexiters by saying that we're going to be leaving the single market and customs union. So I think, yeah, that's true. Like she did at least try or attempt to make happy two different sides. So yeah. The Tories will never forgive John Major for the election disaster in '97. It took them 13 years to recover from that. Oh, don't blame them. Don't blame them because, I mean, I was quite young when John Major was Prime Minister, so I don't really know much about that time in history. But I mean, Tony Blair sort of did move quite far to the centre in order to get the landslide that he did. So he's probably worse than John Major in that sense. So I understand where you're coming from when you say the Tories don't really like John Major for losing them the election in '97. I mean that's a fair point. But like I said, I do respect him for what he said in his speech. When you think something's a bad idea, you might as well speak up and say it. Like wear your heart on your sleeve and tell people why you think it's a bad idea. And like, yeah, you may face backlash from people, and like, I know that 52% of people that voted to leave, but I mean the polls must have changed by now. I mean, I haven't really looked. If anyone actually knows the answer to this, like if the polls have changed in any sense over the past couple of years, I'm sure they have. If there's any sort of change or big difference in whether people would now like to stay in the EU or continue on this road. Um, I'm I'm not sure. Like, I think a lot of people might probably change their minds on it, considering how the Tories are handling Brexit. It's just such a mess, and there's just barely any sort of clarity at all. And yeah, it's not good, is it? The way that they're handling all of this. Um, so yeah, that's pretty much the week of speeches, guys. I'd love to know what you think of all of them. Whether you think Theresa May um, is sort of starting to become on the right track, or not, or whether you think this is still a disaster and we're still gonna, whether or not we're gonna get a good deal or a bad deal still, because I think everything's still quite up in the air in terms of the detail of what's going on. Um, so yeah, let me know if you want to join the stream. By the way, it'd be good to have a chat with someone. Um, so yeah, so um, talked about that. Talked about that. Um, bum, bum, bum. So yeah, as a Remainer, I think. I mean, I was of the vein that we need to get the best deal possible now that we have voted to leave. But because of this government that I hate this government more than I hate Brexit, and I think that's saying something now. I just despise what this government's doing. There's so many domestic problems in this country that are just not getting resolved at all, and if anything, they're being made worse by this horrific government. Um, and so the amount of homeless people has doubled over the past 5 years, and people going to food banks has gone up exponentially. The NHS is in crisis. Um, Children going hungry. In work poverty, universal credit. Um, it's it's just a complete disaster. Um, I just hate what they're doing. It's so bad. Like it's noticeably bad. Like I go out into the street, I go into town, and there's just people littered like all over. Like more homeless people, and it's so sad because like this doesn't need to happen. This doesn't, in the 21st century in 2018. This doesn't need to happen. Homeless people do not need to be freezing on the street. They need to have somewhere to go, and like also rising house prices where people around my age won't likely ever be able to afford a house the way that things are going. Um, like it, lots of people like me will probably be having to rent for the rest of their lives, and even then rents are quite expensive. Um, but so the big stumbling blocks, James says in the comments, the big stumbling blocks for the PM are the local elections and the issue regarding, yeah, Northern Ireland, yes, and the local elections, yes, which I believe are in May this year, by elections. So I think she definitely needs to be careful. So yeah, in that vein, it was a good speech because I think people need to be aware of the future, and I think the Tories are at this point terrified of having a Labour government. Um, I it's possibly quite close to happening, if you think about it, because there are a number of Tory rebels who are mostly Remainers who would be happy to vote with the opposition, um, if it means sort of getting the Brexit that they want to get. So, like being in a customs union, for example. And if more people vote with the Labour Party than vote with the Tories, then that could possibly bring in a vote of confidence or a motion of a confidence motion, which could potentially bring down the government and then pave the way for a Labour government. So it's all possible. I think it's very possible. And Jeremy Corbyn in a video said the other day that change is coming, and I think he's got a point. He's got a point, and like I think sooner rather than later we could possibly get a Labour government, which is quite exciting because I've had enough of this now. I've had enough of this just absolutely horrific Tory government. It's a mess. It's a mess. And who would vote for this? Who keeps voting for this? That I think the last poll that I saw was the Tories and Labour are still pretty much neck and neck in the polls. I think it's like 42% each way ish. But I I just can't it's I just want this government to go away because they're stripping the country away bit by bit, and it's just insane. It's driving me up the wall what the damage that they're doing to people. Like it's visibly obvious, and it's just nobody should be living like this. Just people in the streets and people struggling to pay rent and to pay for like bills and food and um the energy caps and the pay caps and the NHS and nurses not being paid enough. I mean, you get to a point where you think to yourself, like, enough is enough. Like, despite what I think about this party, I mean, they're just bringing it to its knees. And I think both Theresa May and David Cameron have a lot to answer for what they have done and are doing to this country because it's going so badly that we need to get this government out. Just get them out because, as I said, I would rather at this time get the Tories out of government and replace them with a Labour government. I don't care what you think of the rhetoric where you think Jeremy Corbyn's going to destroy the economy, run on the pound. Oh my goodness, he's going to turn us all into communist. There'll be gulags and stuff. That's so exaggerated, and I don't. It's not even true. Like, take a look at the manifesto and see what he's got to say about you know, £10 minimum wage and lowering tuition fees, or if not abolishing them. Um, putting more money into the NHS, renationalising the train rail system, also utilities as well. Um, it's offers such a brighter picture of the world, that the country that we effectively want to live in the future, especially for the young generation who like want to grow up with some prospects and like have a good careers and a bright future and be able to afford houses and just generally have like a brighter outlook as opposed to what we've got at the minute, which is just looking more and more hopeless by the day. So yeah, that's my view and that's my take on what we need to do to get this Tory government out of office. I know Brexit is a big thing, and some people would argue that having a general election would disrupt the Brexit process, which it would, but at the same time, I would much rather have a Labour government running the show and getting like the best for this country, because I don't believe that this government is doing the best it can for this country. Excuse me, I'm just having a drink. So, Let's go to the chat. Ian says a lot of Romanians come over without a brass farthing and keep on the streets. Well, I mean, there are a lot of immigrants who also fall on hard times, but there are also a lot of people in this country who fall on hard times, and I mean, everyone's got their own problems, haven't they? And whether it's like family, breakup of family, or drugs, or conflict, like domestic conflict, or this, that, or the other. And I don't think that, I mean, there's always room to try and scapegoat and blame people for why they're in the situations that they are. But I think you have to try and see past that and try and help people in the best way that you can. Um, yeah, so yeah. Philip Mason in the chat says new 200 million investment in a new Siemens factory, Airbus expanding in the UK. Aston Martin new investment in a plant. Oh, these things happening as a result of the Brexit negotiations. Yeah, I think a number of car companies have confirmed that they're going to be staying in the UK. I think there's a car plant in Derbyshire that is that they're going to stay on manufacturing car parts, um, which is a good thing. I mean, I'm glad that they're not moving. Um, so it's good to have that affirmation that companies aren't going to move away from the UK. But that just goes to show even more that we absolutely need to have the best steel possible in order for businesses to thrive in the UK. Brexit of companies never happened. In fact, investment has increased. Uh, no, but the idea of Brexit in the first instance, I would argue, scared a lot of businesses, and a lot of industries. I mean, like, for example, I think this was a few weeks ago that when some Japanese ambassadors came to Downing Street to talk to Theresa May about having a free trade deal and having a relationship with the EU, basically saying to have straight that if anything happens to endanger our business in the UK, as with regard to the relationship with the EU, if that goes downhill, then we're going to pretty much move our industries to the EU and to Europe so that we have a definite, you know, we've got like good, 100% chance that they won't be in danger. And also with Labour saying that they're gonna at least try and want to set up a new customs union, that encourages new businesses or like existing businesses to stay in this country. I mean, like this whole issue of Brexit, like we wouldn't have to be talking about this if Brexit wasn't happening, would it? But here we are. And I think Brexit itself it does pose somewhat like a big threat to businesses. So I think it's good for them to be wary of what might happen. So, I mean, it obviously like it's a good thing that businesses are staying on. So we've it's good. It's always good to have confirmation from especially big corporations and big businesses that they're going to remain in the UK and keep investing in people here, which is good. But on the negative side, you've got an issue like the NHS where, as a result of the Brexit vote, like massive swathes of like nurses and doctors just up and left because the thought of them not having a stable future, or like being able to work here in future, that made them worry, understandably, about what their position would be. So, and a lot of immigration is made up of like a lot of the NHS is made up of immigrants, whether you like it or not, and like that's pretty much the makeup of the NHS, and that's part of the reason why it's going downhill at the moment, because it's just the staffing levels are down as a result of people leaving their positions, leaving their jobs to go abroad because the pay is better abroad, and that's just the truth of it. So there's ups and downs of this, and in both senses. So Ian says it's best we develop our independence in case the equivalent Junker character goes rogue in the future. Excuse me. I prefer Southeast Asian letters. That's nice. I don't know, man. Like, I'm a Remainer, so I mean, out of all of it, I just think that we're better off as we are at the moment. And if anything changes in the future, if anything dramatic happens, like, you know, United States of Europe and European Army and all of this stuff, then maybe then we can have another talk. But for now, it seems like the most stable option is to stay within a single market and a customs union. And that's just what I think. Rather than having to go through all of this just completely unnecessary stuff, like negotiations, which are proving to be so difficult. Like, how long has it taken us? Like, it's almost been 2 years since the Brexit vote, and like it's just. I mean, like the idea that it's going to take us 2 years to fully leave. It's just like that's pie in the sky talk. I think arranging a free trade agreement. I mean, like the one that was arranged with Canada, I think that took about 7 years, or at least that amount. So I just think people need to come back down to earth a little bit, which I think Theresa May did to an extent in her speech, a little bit, not loads, but a little bit, which can only be a good thing. So yeah. Excuse me, I'm just going to take another drink. Anyone who wants to join the chat, by the way, feel free. And I will check out the link as well. All that sweat and toil to pay for free trade in the single market. Well, I think the official figure that was decided in December, I think, was about, is it 40 or 50 billion pounds? Correct me if I'm wrong. That's still a lot. That's a fair amount of money. So that's to arrange a free trade deal. But the benefits that we gained from being in the single market, and also European funding in our country that has helped to develop many towns and cities that have been completely abandoned by our government over the past 7 years. So places like Manchester, Liverpool, Bradford, Leeds, Hull, those sorts of northern cities that have had investments over the past few decades, specifically from the EU, that we will no longer get because obviously we're going to be leaving. I've waited 40 years, 2 years is nothing. Well, that's fair. I mean, how is life? How is your life? People who specifically voted to leave. How has life been? Has it been negative? Has your life been worse off for being in the EU? I mean, or is it to do with domestic policies? Is it to do with government spending? Is it to do with government policy as opposed to EU policy? I mean, you could make the argument about Greece and how the EU handled Greece and pretty much put it into a state of like high austerity and basically bankrupted it, and all it had to rely on was its tourism, which was bad enough. But I think I think in answer to your question, Philip Mason, um, blue passports, Jesus. Why do we have to have political union to trade? I think it is important to maintain these relationships. I mean, being inside a collective trade bloc means that with you know quite good regulations and quite good sort of standards in terms of like animal welfare and like food hygiene and health and safety, that sort of thing, and access to um, different sorts of medicines and just the freer and more frictionless um, trade that we are able to have without tariffs. And it's just made so much easier by being a part of that, I think. And just our decision to break my view is that our decision to break away from the EU. I mean, Theresa May said it herself that like not no longer having access to the single market would effectively make us like it would be a different sort of like it would our relationship would be different, and we wouldn't have the same sort of deal that we have now. And I think that in that sense we'd be worse off. I think that's the thing that she sort of evaded from saying, um, by no longer having the same sort of access. Um, it would be harder for us to get what we wanted in that sense. So I think that's why it's important to retain these sorts of unions. Um, yeah, I mean, you could argue that in the investments from that the EU gave us was our money, because we give them money and then they give it to us back. But I mean, if it were up to the government, a Tory government, how would they go about spending that money instead? I think that's another question to ask. Um, because I mean, arts funding's been cut in this country. Um, like health funding has been cut. Like pretty much like community funding has been cut. Like it's just an absolute joke of like how badly decimated this our own country's infrastructure has become as a result of this government. So I think it all depends on how money gets spent, and um, I'm not quite sure how it works, but I think it is that the EU basically tells you tells us like the best places where it should go. Um, so I think you need to balance out who's got the best interests of certain countries, um, and certain governments as well, and like what their agendas are in terms of like what they want to do to a country. Um, so let's get through the comments. Jabs M, hello, says it's all about the blue passport. Oh my god, blue passports. Jesus Christ. If we end up getting blue passports, I think it's safe to say I'm gonna apply for an Irish passport, because my grandma was Irish and I am entitled in that sense to apply for an Irish passport for Irish citizenship. So therefore I will be part of the EU again. Yay! Um so Philip Mason, our food regulations are the same, if not superior, to the EU. Well, that's what Theresa May was talking about in her speech, wasn't it? Is that we would um try our utmost to um either have the very same regulations and standards as the EU, if not better. I mean that can only be a good thing, can't it? Really. Um, but I think with the danger of the Henry VIII laws that were going through Parliament a few months ago, was that the thing that I thought was not very well, that I worried about, that I was quite concerned about, is that what we would essentially be doing is taking laws from the EU and placing more power into the hands of a Tory government, a right wing government, which, you know, its agenda and its you know policies are very, very concerning and quite questionable. And just to place more power into the hands of those sorts of people who arguably think more about themselves, instead of, the poorest people in society. I think that did concern me quite a bit. So, yeah. So, Ian says, "Let us leave and May rejoin if we can be the gaffers." So you're saying we should leave and then rejoin later. Phil says we're going back to slaughtering pigs in the street, for goodness sake. I have not seen that yet, but that's worrying. If it is happening, but I think, yeah, animal welfare is definitely up there. I think the Green Party do quite a lot of work with this sort of thing. And I'm quite a big fan of Caroline Lucas, and she's talked a lot about sort of regulations and food standards and all of the rest of it. But pigs being slaughtered in the street, I'll believe it when I see it, or if there's a video of it somewhere, then that is concerning. Jack James says, to be fair, our food regulation was written by the EU mainly. Yeah, that's true. I mean, like, I would say, like, our sort of our sort of laws when we joined the EU were sort of put together by those people, and I mean, there's no laws that I can think of that are altogether unreasonable. So, for example, like, there's a rule with Hoovers that they can't have like a large amount of energy usage, which sounds fair because the planet's warming up, etc. So I think that needs to be taken into account. Hello, Jack James. Phil Mason says we don't know how they'll spend the money, but it's ours to spend as we wish. That's true. That is true, but again, I just don't like it, like the way that the government is treating this country and how it's just. I mean, I don't know if you saw George Osborne's tweet the other day. He tweeted about how we'd reached the 2-year austerity thing. I'll try and find it. Do 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 do. George Osborne. He tweeted on the 1st of March, "We got there in the end, a remarkable national effort. Thank you." And then he tweeted an article from the Financial Times saying, "George Osborne austerity target is finally hit 2 years late." Oh my God. Jesus. And I just thought, like, how dare you throw yourself into being a part of this whole thing when he basically inflicted austerity on the entire nation. I just thought, like, why are you congratulating? Why are you saying well done to us? Like, you just put us through so much hardship, so much having to go without, and he's just trying to include himself. Like, he had to go through the exact same thing. I mean, I just find that just stomach churning. And people have died because of austerity, and that's not I'm not making that up. People who are homeless, people who just are on benefits, don't have any money, can't pay their landlords, can't pay their rent, can't feed their kids. It's just a complete disgrace. It's a complete disgrace. And the whole thing with universal credit that I did a video on as well. It's just unspeakable that George Osborne, previous Chancellor, even decided that he was going to tweet that out. I mean, Jesus Christ. What gall. Jesus. Anyway. Hi everyone. Hi everyone that's joined. Jack James, does anyone else hate this that some politicians keep citing 17.4 million who voted for Brexit as if we all want? Yeah, that isn't. I think they do make quite sweeping generalizations for saying that 17.4 million all voted. I mean, obviously they voted for different reasons. Some people are obviously misled by a lot of things, and a lot of ideas and a lot of statistics were miscommunicated, and a lot of people obviously didn't fully understand what it was they're voting for. And I will say that because I think that there's a lot of truth in it. But at the same time, obviously people like Swiss and Sty voted for well thought out reasons to do with independence and wanting to be out of a bureaucratic state, collective state, whatever you want to call it, which they didn't like. So yeah, those are different reasons. So I agree with you. I'm just gonna go off and get something just for a minute. So I'll be right back. So talk amongst yourselves for a little bit, guys. And also, feel free if you want to join the chat. I'll throw the link out to you as well. So let me know. And I'm back. So Philip Mason says, oh, sorry, no. Jack James, I've been an anti-EU for decades, mainly because I don't think we can have an industrial revolution under direct control from Brussels. That's an interesting point. So that's basically saying you. I don't. I don't believe that we are under direct control over Brussels. I think they have some input into our laws and obviously like being part of the ECJ, we have to sort of follow what goes on under that umbrella. But I think the idea of us not being sovereign is just something that I think was peddled during the referendum, that we're not a sovereign country. We are a sovereign country. We have our own sovereign parliament and we can make our own laws as and when we want to. And, like to me, I just think like, so what if they have to be like part of like a EU legislation? Like it's not most of it isn't unreasonable, and it's not like hugely demanding, and I just think, like, call me naive, but like I don't see it as being I don't see the EU as being as authoritative as a lot of Brexiters are making out that it is. I understand that it's not perfect, and it's got a lot of flaws in that it's very um centrally controlled, and it's very bureaucratic in terms of its decision making. But we have MEPs who are there for a reason, and we elect our own MEPs. But I just I think that it's not necessarily the worst thing in the world being part of a trading bloc that um is quite like it's something that is quite has been quite prosperous so far. Um, so yeah. Um, yeah. Let me know if any of you want to join the chat. I have asked Angels and Swiss if they want to come in, but they haven't replied yet. Um, so I'm just waiting to see if they want to be part of it. Um, yeah, I'd be interested to know what you thought of, especially people who voted for Brexit, like what you thought of Theresa May's speech on Friday, whether you thought it sort of did a good job in settling both sides of like remain and leave. Because it offered some clarity, as I said, but not enough in others. Um, so and also like what you thought of John Major and Jeremy Corbyn as well, um, who I think more clarity needs to be offered on both sides of the party, like a lot more clarity. But I think I'm still with Labour as far as Brexit's concerned, because I just don't trust the Conservatives to um do good out of this, if you know what I mean. Um, yeah. Jack James says, when I say direct control, I mainly mean over our internal market. For new industries to form, I believe we will need to be a bit protectionist and invest directly into our industries. Yeah, I think that's true. I think to an extent that's what the Tories are trying to do, especially in the tech industry with like robotics and all of that, like cybersecurity, and all of that side of things. I think the government's trying to do that, and there's been a lot of news about investment into that in those sorts of industries and like the car industries and all of that, which is a good thing. But there's, I mean, half of our trade, almost half of our trade goes to Europe anyway. And so I think as Theresa May said in her speech, like we want to be an open, sort of flexible, democratic um, relationship with the EU. And what she set out in terms of like her key directives of staying part of certain agencies and um, organizations, paying into certain collectives, such as like the Medicines Agency and the Aviation and um, Chemicals Agency. That's a good thing. Um, Not just steel, although we obviously benefit from having steel. Um, we can move ahead in green tech, robotics. Yes, absolutely. I think that. Yeah, I think we should definitely invest in more green technology. We should have more wind farms. I think Hinkley is an absolute like disaster. Doesn't need to be there at all. I think that's ruined and destroyed a lot of wildlife conservation that could have happened there. Um, and I just also like fracking is a massive problem as well. Um, Interesting point actually to do with fracking. I was watching on I don't know if anyone was watching Question Time on Thursday, but Nigel Farage happened to be on Question Time, which I think it was his 30-second appearance on Newsnight, and they would talk, and one person raised the question of fracking in Blackpool, which was where they were. An audience member talked about fracking, um, and the fact that their community were against the government's intervention of wanting to overturn their community in the decision to frack that area. And Nigel Farage said that, oh, it was okay for the government to um, it's okay basically to overturn the will of the people when it comes to government intervention in domestic policy such as fracking. But then also, so I basically tweeted that I said, oh, it's a double standard, isn't it? If you suggest that overturning the will of the people is okay when it comes to fracking in a community who don't want it, but then also thinks that people are traitors for wanting to overturn Brexit, you can't just say one thing and then do another. I think that's the height of hypocrisy, isn't it? So I think, yeah, fatal error in saying that. Um, fracking, as I said, is just another method of like fossil fuels that we just don't need, and I think we should invest more in green energy, wind farms, hydroelectric, solar, um, and all the rest of it, because climate change is a big, big issue. I don't think it's getting talked about nearly enough as it should be. I know Sky News talked about it a lot last year in terms of plastic in the ocean and stuff. And I need to get rid of plastics. But again, like green energy is the way forward. And, that's equally as good a job creator in my view. And we should just get rid of fossil fuels. Because they don't do anything. Well, obviously they do things for our country, like in terms of energy, but not in a sustainable way. So let's go through some of these comments. Chat James, the EU does have a few competition rules that stops us from doing this. Yes, that's true. Philip Mason in the comments says that's the route this and future governments should take, definitely encourage investments, which is happening already. Yeah. Are you talking about like investment in tech and sort of all of this stuff? I suppose the difference right now is that we have to wait for companies to invest into new industries under competition rules. There's no role for the state apart from offering tax exemptions. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I think you've got a good point there. I mean, I think a lot of new industries, such as like, robotics and all of the rest of it. I mean, I don't pretend to know a great deal about all of it, but I think you're right. Um, especially in light of China sort of being like the second biggest um, economy, like catching up to the US. I'm actually interested, actually. I think because I think in the news this week, Donald Trump announced that he was going to raise tariffs on steel for other countries importing it. So that would have obviously have a huge impact on our ability to export steel to America, or in fact, the whole of the EU. Obviously, like prices would go up for like in terms of manufacturing. So I don't know how would that affect? Would people if tariffs went up, would that affect people in the steel industry? Obviously making the steel. Would that affect the way that they got paid, or would it decrease as a result? I think that's an interesting thing to talk about. Um, yeah, I think that's a quite a protectionist move because he obviously like Donald Trump is all about America first in that, and he wants to try and keep key industries like the steel industry and oil and all of that in the US as opposed to it being um, taken out to places like China and India where it can be cheap cheaply made. But the idea of basically putting a tax on steel in order for it to be specifically manufactured and designed in the US, is that a good thing? Obviously, it's a good thing for the US, but it's not necessarily a good thing for the rest of the world because that puts you at risk of starting trade wars, especially with the likes of China, who are massive manufacturers of steel. So yeah, that's that. There's that aspect to it. Um, I was just looking for an article about Theresa May's speech. Um, la 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 la. How long have I been going for? Quite a while. Um, mm, yeah, I think yeah. If no one joins in the next 10 minutes, I think I'm gonna wrap this stream up, guys. Um, so yeah, Trump is right and wrong. He's putting tariffs on resources rather than end products, which is what he should do. Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, as I said, you're putting at risk a lot of other key like trade countries and trading arrangements um by being that protectionist and raising tariffs on your own products in order to keep them in your own country. I think that is very protectionist. And like it or not, I think globalization has happened. I mean, the idea that the idea that you can just restart all of these old industries such as, I don't know, timber, steel, coal mines. Um, I think that I'm sorry, but they're dead and buried at this point. Like the last of the coal mines in the UK was shut like in the mid 90s, as far as I know. So the idea that Trump is going to bring all of these industries back into the hands of like the people that have been made redundant or unemployed by them moving elsewhere, like in China and um, parts of Asia and like Malaysia and all of these manufacturing places, like it's just not going to happen. Like that the horse is bolted and like the boat has sailed on on keeping industries inside of your own country. Like we've moved into an era where trade is shared rather than kept to yourself. So like, for example, in Europe, as I'm sure you're aware, like car parts and car manufacturing, like different parts of the vehicle are made all over Europe and sent over borders across to other parts of the continent in order to effectively create the end product. So, I mean, yes, there are car manufacturers in this country, but they only effectively make part of the vehicle, and then it's shipped off to another part of Europe to be sort of carried on somewhere else. So I think being an exclusive country where, you know, your a product is directly under the jurisdiction of one country, I think those days are sort of moving into the past to an extent. So yeah, as you say, I think he's more wrong than right by 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 making this move on tariffs in steel. Um, Philip says Germany is using coal like there's no tomorrow, so should we? I disagree with that. I absolutely disagree. Clean coal technology exists. Clean coal, are you guys real? Are you for real? No. Clean coal, really? Beautiful, clean coal. No. I the idea of like going back to fossil fuels and again with the whole fracking issue, I just no, absolutely not. I'm a green person and I think that the direction we absolutely need to go in is sustainable renewable energy, solar energy, hydro energy, um wind energy. I mean like Scotland is going really in the right direction with this. I think um I saw a statistic, I think like about you could power half the country with just like at the current time half the country using sustainable energy, which is great. That's amazing. So I no, I disagree with you about having clean coal. Jesus, coal is like the dirtiest fossil fuel other than oil. Um, and we need to like start pulling back on our usage of oil as well. I mean, like electric cars and um, you know, vehicles that significantly reduce the carbon footprint um, are the way forward at this point. I'm serious, it's safer than fracking. Yeah, well, yeah, it will take time to get there, but I think we're this planet's running out of time in terms of the what's going on in like the North Pole and the South Pole in terms of the melting ice and etc. As I'm sure a lot of you all know. Um, I think you have a stigma about what coal mining. Well, yeah, probably because I wasn't really alive in the era of coal mining. Like I remember seeing a lot of it on TV, like um sort of around like Margaret Thatcher and like the miners' strikes and all of that. Um, and that being a huge problem because she in effect closed down, shut down the unions and shut down the mines. Effectively, got that job done in a flash, which upset a lot of people, um, understandably so. So I sort of understand the sort of work ethic and the background of how important coal mining used to be because back when coal was pretty much one of the only sources of energy that could be found, then yeah, I understand that it's a massive source of employment, a massive source of resources and energy. But now we've moved into an era where there are other forms of sustainable energy that could be worked on more. Um, Composting is another idea. Um, using up sort of like waste products to fuel cars, for instance. That's an idea. Um, Luke Warden has joined the chat. Hi, Luke. Um, if it hadn't been for coal-powered electricity plants, we would have been using candles during the week. Yeah, I mean, as I said, I understand that coal and oil and all the rest of it have had a huge impact on our lives and improving our lives, etc., and allowing us to live in an age of electricity and light and gas and all of this. And that's fab, it's great. But we're getting to the stage where we need to start thinking about using other sources of electricity, energy. Um, and you know where is that going to come from? Because it's undeniable fact that, you know, as a result of our heavy usage of you know, drilling oil in the oceans and you know, the especially in America where you've got like the um Dakota Access Pipeline that has blown and leaked more than once now, which has been disastrous. And like in other places, um, in like the Pacific, with oil spills there, and it's just causing so much damage to the planet, guys. Like I'm not being funny, but it's just we need to really start thinking about how we use and abuse this earth. And I know I sound like a green hippie, but it's the truth. And I think to an extent, like well, a large extent, that these massive energy corporations like BP, Exxon, Shell, um, are just greedy corporate capitalist monsters that are not going to give any concessions whatsoever, um, or keep denying that climate change is happening to the detriment of the entire planet, because it is happening. And like it or not, we need to radically change the way that we do things in order to save and keep the planet for our future generations. So there you go. Um, what happens when they're closed? Well, you know, that's the big question, isn't it? Well, we're going to have to be more innovative, aren't we? And find more ways of fueling our um, energy and cars and public transport, etc. We're going to have to be more radically more innovative. Wilson closed mines too. Yeah, well, it's not just the fault of the Tories, is it? It's on both sides. I'm not saying it's one person's fault. It's both. It's you know, consecutive governments that are at fault as well. Um, Luke Wardner says Margaret, she did not help the United Kingdom. What about the protest in 1990 in London? Well, there's been various protests against Margaret Thatcher at many points in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, about various different issues, whether it be closing of the mines or poll tax or taking milk away and this, that, and the other. I mean, in a lot of ways, I'm glad I wasn't around when she was Prime Minister. Um, Wilson closed more mines down than Thatcher. Well, like I said, it's no one person's fault. I think that Margaret Thatcher's got a lot to answer for. She did a lot of damage to unions in this country, basically stripped them of their workers' rights and like just disallowed them to have a voice, which I think was extremely detrimental. Like, Jesus, I can't even imagine what the violence was like, even though I've seen it on TV quite a few times. Um, Mother Earth will tell us on no uncertain terms when we cross the line. Uh, that's quite a naive sentiment, Philip. I think she's telling us now, and we might be living in a happy bubble in the UK at the moment, but I mean, sooner rather than later, I think the shit's going to hit the fan in no uncertain terms, like you said. Um, so we do need to be very careful and very wary of how we go about using and abusing the resources that we have, because fossil fuels are not they're going to run out eventually, and I mean, like, if we can use wind and we can use I mean, like, the sun itself is like a humongous ball of energy that that well, it will run out, but in like millions and millions and millions of years, and that's not damaging to the environment, is it? So, you know, there's something to say for that. Hi everyone who's joined the chat recently, in the past few minutes. Um, do, do, do. Margaret Thatcher absolutely destroyed the British industry, and there were poor people living in hotels. She did not care. Well, I mean, we're going down a very slippery slope in terms of what this Conservative government's doing to poor people in this country. I mean, you could, if you wanted to, compare Theresa May to Margaret Thatcher. She's like arguably Thatcher 2.0 in many cases. I mean, like, I've already explained like what the Conservatives are doing, like just completely tearing the shit out of this country, like no tomorrow, like, and they say it's for austerity reasons, but we need to like pull back and tighten our belts and all of the rest of it, and like just the absolute state the NHS is in. I feel so sorry for nurses they're just getting underpaid, like under resourced, absolutely exhausted every day, like just not coping because the staff levels are going down, and there's not enough staff for the patients that are arriving, especially elderly patients with like the population going up exponentially. Like the population has risen a lot in the past few decades, and like we need to make up for it in terms of infrastructure, which this government just isn't doing. They're just not doing it, and they say that they're doing it, but at the end of the day, it's just words without actions. I think they're not interested in doing it. It's interesting actually because Luke, like you said before in the chat, you're a conservative right winger, except you're quite scathing of Margaret Thatcher in the side chat. So that would be interesting to find out. Yeah, exactly, James Fielding. I thought you were a Tory. Why are you hating on Maggie? Yeah, 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 Luke. Give us a reason. Um, James Fielding, Conservatives don't always agree. Certain policies, and I am one of them. Yeah, I did call you naive, Phil. Yes, I did. Um, what did you like about Thatcher? I've got a question. Are you a Labour supporter or Conservatives? I don't mind. Okay. There are a group of Conservatives that don't like Thatcher because technically she wasn't a Conservative. That's an interesting point to me. Are you saying she was more right wing or less right wing? I think that Margaret Thatcher was wow, she was a character, wasn't she? Oh, John Major, bless him. I'm no Tory, but as I said, I'm not a Tory by any stretch. I mean, there are a lot of things, a lot of policies connected to conservatism that I do not like, and I watched John Major's speech this week, and I thought, well, he's put his money where his mouth is, put his heart on his sleeve, and said what he wanted to say. And like he even stated that he didn't want to um say this because it wasn't his place to say it. But the state of Brexit, the way it's going, I think he felt like he needed to say it. I mean, I've got a page open now, where it gives you a little snippet of John Major's speech on Wednesday, and I think I'll show it to you. I think Angels might be joining us shortly, so that could be exciting. Okay, I'm going to screen share with you guys now parts of the John Major speech, because I think what he said was, despite what you think of John Major, like, I mean, I was 7 when he left office, so I don't remember hugely the impact he had on this country. But let's do a cheeky screen share. Yes. Woo! Okay, I don't know if you guys can see this, but yeah, let's do it.
Our nation is owed a frank assessment of what leaving Europe may mean, both for now and for the future. I fear that we will be weaker and less prosperous as a country and as individuals. And although it grieves me to admit it, our divorce from Europe will diminish our international stature. Indeed, I would argue it already has. The Prime Minister is seeking a frictionless border between Northern Ireland and the Republic. She is absolutely right to do so. This is a promise that must be honoured, and I wish her well. But so far, it's not materialised, nor, I fear, will it, unless we stay in a or the customs union. I spoke earlier of the divisiveness of Brexit across every part of the United Kingdom. But in due time, even the Brexit debate will end. And when it does, we need the highest possible level of public acceptance for the outcome. It is in no one's interest, no one's at all, for the bitterness and the division to linger on. I see only one way to achieve that. It is already agreed that Parliament must pass legislation giving effect to the deal. A meaningful vote has been promised. This must be a decisive vote in which Parliament can accept or reject the final outcome, or send the negotiators back to seek improvements, or order a referendum so the public may approve what has been determined. That is what parliamentary sovereignty really means. I believe the government should take a further, very brave and bold decision. I believe they should invite Parliament to accept or reject the final outcome on a free vote. Suffice to say that nearly every one of the Brexit promises is, if I may quote Henry Fielding, and I do now, a very wholesome and comfortable doctrine to which there is but one objection, namely, it is not true.
Ooh. Yep. There you go, guys. Sir John Major, former Prime Minister of the Tory party, saying that this is a bad idea. And also suggesting the idea of a second referendum, a vote on the deal in Parliament, for members of Parliament to decide whether or not we should, in fact, accept the deal that we get given by the EU, or reject it. And also, like, an interesting point is that with regard to leaving the customs union, is also, I mean, the main reason why people voted to to leave the EU was to maintain or get back sovereignty and parliamentary sovereignty. But the idea of leaving the customs union is basically, in a way, rejecting sovereignty, because you will no longer be allowed to have a say in sort of the way that deals get done as a part of being in the EU bloc, because our veto will no longer be there, so we will no longer have input into what goes on inside the EU. So in that sense, sovereignty will, in a weird way, be taken away from us, because if Theresa May, if she's saying, or if what she's saying is right, that she wants to basically mirror and replicate EU regulation as much as possible and standards as much as possible, but not be in that unit of decision making, then you're basically still, in a sense, I don't want to say taking orders from them, but you lose your ability to have a voice within that collective, if you know what I mean. Someone must know what I'm trying to get at. So yeah, that was John Major making his impassioned speech to stay away and have another vote on the Brexit deal, which I think is it's the most pragmatic speech that I've seen so far, from anyone, in fact. And despite what you think of John Major, I think, it's always fair to listen to every side of the argument. So, yeah. Let's have a look at these comments. Oh gosh, there's a lot of them. Hi, Angels. She's joined the chat finally. You should come in because I've been talking to myself for about 3 hours. Wow, lots of people have commented during that video. Let's start with James Fielding says, "What do you like about the Tories?" to Luke. You've slagged them off since I've joined the chat. This government doesn't give a care about the UK. They've got no care about the United Kingdom. Well, that we can agree on. Finally, I think we can agree on that, Luke. I think, yeah, they're destroying this country by it's awful policies. As I said, James asked, who are you voting for in the next election? Philip Mason says, Grey John, Edwin Curry. Do you mean Edwina Curry? Yeah. Not sure about anyone else. James, if Jacob becomes the new leader of the Conservative Party, I will vote for him. But there is no way I'm supporting a socialist Labour government. Oh my god! Oh my god! I feel like someone's just stabbed my ears. That is the worst thing I could possibly read. I think the novelty with Jacob Rees-Mogg is gone now. Like, my opinion of him was when he started becoming prominent was that, okay, he's like a very posh, obviously well-read individual, who comes from a very well-to-do background, grew up on a country estate, a very privileged person, obviously has a lot to say about Brexit and leaving the EU, but now I think he's had a lot of coverage, and like the way that he's like for example, the way, I mentioned about him talking about John Major earlier.
Hey, by the way, sorry, I don't want to interrupt your flow, and I'm sorry about the voice. I've got a bit of laryngitis at the moment, so
that's all right.
I might have to mute myself in between and have coughing fits. But yeah, sorry, carry on.
But yeah, I was just talking about what Jacob Rees-Mogg said about John Major, about him being part of like an elitist I think it was an elitist Europhile or like part of that brigade. It's like John Major is not an elitist. Like
Coming from Rees-Mogg, who belongs to
exactly,
the
exactly.
1800, with a
Yeah,
silver spoon in his mouth and like
yeah,
3 mansions.
yeah. Yeah, exactly. And I think like why do people like believe this man of like what he says and like, oh wow, he's really clever and like, oh yes, absolutely, I'll kowtow to him and like go on his coattails because he's obviously like very clever and is a Brexiteer and knows what he's talking about with like in terms of like banking and stuff and
and
like
and yeah.
go on.
I was just going to add probably his coattails in literal sense
Yeah, the literal
and
sense.
and the figurative sense, whilst clinging on to his top hat at the same time. I mean,
Yeah.
who the fuck has a son called Sixtus and then turns around and calls anyone else an elitist?
Exactly. The hypocrisy of it. I think I retweeted someone earlier on. Someone said, at the end of the day, Jacob Rees-Mogg will never amount to anything or achieve anything without the help of others. He is the very epitome of the British elite establishment that cares about nothing other than feathering their own nests, something that Brexit very much facilitates. And I was like, damn, that is spot on.
Yeah. I mean, actually, I don't know whether the guys in the side chat would agree with me or whether you think this, but I think Jacob Rees-Mogg, I think Swiss was right when he said he has the inverse Corbyn appeal. I think that there's an element of it's almost like he's the epitome. He's almost like a cartoon of what a rich aristocratic Tory should be. And so I think it's a mix of like personality politics and the fact that he's so incredibly sort of extreme and almost the total archetype of what the party is meant to be headed up by. And on the flip side, you've got obviously Corbyn, who's sort of a bit of a ragged bearded socialist, as it were, with like an allotment who rides a bike. so I think maybe it's like, I think that he was right when he said it's almost like an inverse appeal to that. And plus the fact I think people are just amused by how ridiculously posh he is. I mean, it's literally, it's almost like you're watching a bit of a sketch show. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, like in many ways, I think the main reason why people, and this is the difference between Jeremy Corbyn and Jacob Rees-Mogg, is that people are attracted to the idea of Jacob Rees-Mogg and his character, as opposed to like what he's voted for in the past and his policy platforms, etc. Whereas people like Jeremy Corbyn for very specific principled reasons in that he they like his voting record and they like how he is as a person and they they've looked at his manifesto and the people that he surrounds himself with and that's what they like about him as opposed to just forming an opinion based on his character and appearance alone. So I think that's the main difference between both of them.
Now, James Fielding said this before. He said that he would go back to voting Tory if Michael Gove became Tory leader. Now, I think he's a proper like creep, Michael Gove. Like, I really just, oh God, I don't know.
But he doesn't use lip salve.
No, oh God, don't. No, that's actually one thing that slightly bugs me. But that is really interesting what they said in the comments. They said, Cameron said it's the younger Conservatives who are passionate about Mogg, but that the members who do vote in a leadership election are overwhelmingly older in demographics. That's actually a really good point. I hadn't thought about that. So Rees-Mogg might have an appeal amongst sort of on that sort of level, on that personality sort of level, and the you know have I got news for you factor amongst sort of perhaps people who may potentially vote Conservative but aren't a member. But actually, if you think about it, it's like when we were talking about the membership of parties the other day, they have had a decline in membership, the Tories, haven't they? I think they're between 70 and 100,000 or around that, but whatever, it's declining. And now apparently the average age of a member of the Conservative Party is a
It was
whopping
about
72. 72.
Exactly. Yeah,
That's
that's
unbelievable.
true.
So would he necessarily have overwhelming support from like people in their 70s? I mean, I don't know. The demographics might make a difference.
I would like to ask people in the chat who are fans of Jacob Rees-Mogg, like what specifically and substantially is it? What is it that you like about him, other than his personality, that would make you want to vote for him? And I understand that he's obviously like a Brexiter, but like there are lots of other people in the Conservative Party who are Brexiters as well. So I mean, like, what specifically is it about him that would make you think that he would make a good leader?
72 is a vintage year. You would say that, Phil Mason.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm just gonna go through some of the comments in the chat. Where to start? Jack James says, I saw a poll being run by Conservative Home a few weeks back. Surprisingly, Mogg is not a favourite with the members, which blew my mind. That's not surprising. He's still a backbencher, isn't he? So he's not like a part of the cabinet. I think it's the younger Tories. But yeah, Gove is a straw man. James Fielding. The latest polls say that Jacob Rees-Mogg is likely to replace Theresa May. Oh my God, that's a scary thought, isn't it? That's what it sounds like. The members who will vote in a leadership election are overwhelmingly older in demographics. Ian says he's proper. What does that mean? Cameron Hitman gave, come now, how can anyone support this cuck? Look at his time in environment. He's doing great stuff and was good at education secretary as well. Yeah, I mean, like he's spoken up, like Michael Gove has spoken up a little bit about the use of plastics and stuff, and like how we need to do better in terms of like looking after our oceans and stuff, and like conserving wildlife, etc. I mean, I'm trying to find like a bad thing to say about Michael Gove, but I think he's managed to squirrel himself away in his little environment sec job, and seems to be, for the moment, keeping himself to himself, other than to pop his head above water to talk about Brexit every now and again.
Yeah, but he's been strangely sort of rather vocal in this new sort of green role and stuff, and I don't trust him as far as I can throw him, nor his wife or Boris for that matter. So like, I'm like, what is your agenda, you little slimy piece of shit?
Yeah.
Also, buy a chapstick while you're at it.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I agree with you on that front. Like, I like what he's doing in his role, but at the same time, I don't trust, like, why you're a Tory, you're a Brexiter, why are you being like this? You're being quite responsible. But yeah, so I was going to ask you, Angels, like whilst I was doing my spiel earlier, what did you think of Theresa May's Brexit speech?
I thought it was really quite obvious that she was trying to keep everybody happy, because I think she knows she's in a position where she's not able, she doesn't really have any form of mandate to piss off either side at this point. So I felt like it was really trying to, keep sort of things together, basically. When you sort of think, is this speech, it's a bit like when Phil Hammond did the budget. You just thought, right, you're going to have to get through this somehow without rocking the boat too much. And that's what I felt like she managed to achieve to an extent in the speech, but it was rather underwhelming for both sides. That's what I thought.
I mean, like I said this week in one of Swiss's streams that I hoped that she would be a lot more detailed in how she's going to lay out her plans for how Brexit is going to look. And I think, like, in one sense she did that, but in another sense she didn't, because there were still the platitudes of we need to take back control and, retain our constitutional union, etc., and all the rest of it. But yeah, there was just still I watched it yesterday, and I I kept like zoning out, and like I kept getting distracted by the things because she's not very she's not very charismatic, is she? She's not an engaging speaker. So yeah, that's what I took from it. I mean, like she did lay out some key points. So like such as you know, maintaining, like basically mirroring and replicating the same sort of standards and regulations as close as possible that we already have with the EU. And like I just thought to myself, like, well, if we're gonna do this, if we're gonna go this way and like keep this close relationship, then what what's the point in leaving?
Exactly.
Pretty
Yeah.
much. So
well, I thought that there were a few things in there that was sort of like, okay, you can sort of tell why she put them in there in order to try to appease or basically try to make sure that both sides could just about stomach it. But there will be things in there which are way too ambiguous when it comes to close links to the EU, which are going to annoy the hard Brexiters, and the Remainers are annoyed because they're like thinking, well, no, you're just kind of trying to appease the Remainers because you know that they're pissed off with your stupid barreling sort of shambolic, like unplanned Brexit strategy. Because it's obvious that the government itself are so ridiculously split on it. I mean,
yeah.
what I thought was really a bit unfair, or very unfair, and massively ironic was when she said, "Look, I want to bring the country together." What? You want to bring the country together?
She said that more than once.
No, but also, yeah, but I mean, how on earth can she bring the country together when she can't bring her own bloody party together? It's just, oh God.
It is a bit of, it's such a mess. Like there are several times when she says something and you're like, what? Like, how can you say that? And like exactly as you said, like, I think she's got like a massive mess in front of her that she's trying to clear up, but more and more shit keeps getting piled on top of it as she's trying to clear it. And it's like, no, like help. It's just a disaster. And like, I think there was something in the news the other day. I think because Anna Soubry was on Daily Politics, and she's obviously like an arch Remainer. And as you know, like Jeremy Corbyn made a big statement about staying in some form of a customs union, so as to sort of not create a problem with the Northern Irish border. And that wasn't clarified either in Theresa May's speech.
In Theresa May's speech, no, I know it wasn't. That's what I mean. It was not very clear at all.
No.
It was,
but like the idea of having Tory rebels have a vote in Parliament and joining the opposition party in order to vote for a customs union as opposed to leaving the customs union, that could endanger Theresa May. But I'm not sure. I'm not sure if that would happen because I mean, if there are too many people that side with the Labour Party and all the other parties, then that obviously with having such a tiny majority, that puts your government in danger, doesn't it? So yeah, she's in a difficult situation.
Yeah, I mean, do you think so I mean, do you because I still don't think that she's made it particularly, like I think that this Northern Irish thing is going to be a massive thorn in her side, or in their side indeed. But I also don't see how the way that she phrased this whole thing, she was like trying to imply that we wouldn't be in a sort of a customs arrangement, but then she also hinted that we would in some form. Like it was not actually,
wasn't it like a customs
arrangement,
partnership
or something? Yeah.
Did you notice when I think it was like some sort of like a Freudian slip or whatever, I don't know, like she said when she was talking about the border with Northern Ireland, like I want to make I want to avoid having like a frictionless border. And like, wait, I'm sorry, I should make that clear. I want to avoid having a hard border. I was like, okay. So I mean, like again, like with the whole like she's not a very good speaker. She's not charismatic, and she's not able to engage audiences in the same way that Jeremy Corbyn can. And like I Jeremy Corbyn used to like a few like even as far back as like a year ago, like was very softly spoken and was quite like not used to being in big crowds and didn't really speak up for himself. But now I think he's gotten way better, and I think arguably is better than Theresa May at like addressing crowds of people and getting them to side with him. So I think that's the difference between both of them.
I mean, I think I don't know. It still does not appear to me that there is a particularly clean-cut strategy which is going to keep everyone happy whatsoever. I actually do think that we're going to find ourselves whether even if they do have a clean break from the customs union, the single market, that there will be some form of customs arrangement, and no doubt that she'll concede like she has done in previously with various other points, which is going to piss off the Brexiters to high heaven. And I think many of the things that the UK will end up agreeing to will bring us to a position where it's like, well, what's the point in leaving in the first place?
Yeah, I mean, all of this just seems to be a colossal waste of time.
Yeah, and money and just a pain in the arse. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think the issue of like the Northern Irish border as well, like that's obviously a humongous sticking point. And I really wish, like, because the EU have stated, like, we've got some options. Either you have a hard border on the Northern Irish border, or you don't have a border at all, and it's in the Irish Sea. And if you've got any other solutions, then please feel free to give us your solutions. And to be fair, like she did offer sort of half a solution by saying let's be in a customs arrangement. Like, well, can you please explain how or how that would work and like where the borders would be? Because she like wholeheartedly rejected the idea of the border being in the sea because it would threaten the union. So yeah, I really wish that she would just I don't know, just be more detailed and just have some balls to just set out this is what I want. And like I was glad that she seemed to come out of the delusion of cake and eat it sort of thing. But I think she still needs to come further into the realms of reality in terms of what specifically it is that we can get out of this.
Yeah, and I mean, like I saw Phil said in the side chat that Northern Ireland will be sorted. She said that that they'll all get round the table and sort it as far as the Ireland, the UK, and the EU. But yeah, but that still doesn't really answer anything, does it? That's just having blind faith. Like there still doesn't really appear to be sort of a clear-cut plan from that perspective. I just but he also added that the plan, if there is one, because I didn't see a clear one really, from the government, is better than Labour's fantasy Brexit that apparently has been blown out of the water. I mean, I don't necessarily disagree. I think that Brexit is a total shit show, as you know. But it doesn't matter, Phil, because Labour aren't in power. We're talking about the government here, and they still don't have a plan this late in. That's really quite alarming.
Well, that's what I argued earlier when you went here, was that because Labour aren't in government, they are arguably under far less scrutiny than what the government is at the moment. I mean, they can say that, yes, we want to be in a customs union, but they, I mean, obviously they can lay out what it is specifically they want. I think Keir Starmer was talking about having an arrangement that, you know, things are only like products and bits and pieces are only checked at the at a border once, so that it can go around whichever country and then come back without it being too costly and without sort of tariffs and whatever. But as I was saying, like the Conservatives are the ones in government, so they need to have a much stronger idea of what it is that they're negotiating and what it is that they want. So they can't really get away with being half-assed. But anyway, I'm just gonna have a look through these comments because I think I've missed quite a few.
Yeah, both of us have missed quite a lot.
Gosh. Philip Mason says, brilliant speech, surely angels. She brought both sides together. No easy task.
I think she was trying to be fair. But...
Yeah, she was making an effort. Cameron says the speech was nothing new. A speech of substance, no customs union, no single market, no ECJ. Well, with regard to the ECJ, she did talk about still being under the ECJ umbrella a little bit by saying like, well, if we sort of have the same laws, then if we don't need to change them, then we won't change them, and we'll still follow the same sort of laws and regulations. In that sense, I think. What was it? I've got a list here of what it was. It says independent arbitration mechanism for trade disputes to replace role currently played by the European Court of Justice. So I think that's sort of trying to replace different I don't know what it's trying to say. Yeah. But yeah, I think she did talk about the ECJ quite a bit, and she sort of mentioned the idea of us if we don't need to replace laws that we don't need to replace because they're fine as they are, then we would basically just won't change them. I think that's the gist of what she said. So we'll still sort of have a relationship with them on that front. Blah blah blah. Luke Warner says Theresa May cannot even bring the whole Conservative Party together. That's true. That's very true. Bill Mason says Wollaston was very happy with it. Soubry blabbing on as usual. I quite like Anna Soubry, because she's a Remainer, and
she's certainly got balls, to be honest. I mean, to actually stand up and rebel against your party just simply because you know that it's what you believe, then because it's no easy feat, really. It's much easier to fall in line, isn't it?
Exactly. That's exactly what John Major has just done, isn't it? And like as I said before, like if you've got an opinion and you feel strongly about it, that you have to stand up and say something, then that's quite admirable, isn't it? I think you shouldn't I mean, it's fine to criticize, but like to attack someone for having their own opinion and going against your party, I mean, that's a bit extreme. Cameron says Soubry and Blair should get married. Soubry is annoying, says one thing and does the exact opposite. Really? Okay. Do you guys think that Jack James says, do you guys think that there's a chance that May would remain part of the single market? I was reading a piece by Hitchens where he estimates that she would move to that position. I'm not sure really, because I mean, she did that was one of the specifics in her speech where she said it was a hard truth that we were definitively leaving the single market and the customs union, and that we would effectively she rejected the Norway model and the Canada model because Norway is part of the EEA, which means that they have access to the single market, free access to the single market, but we wouldn't want that because we are leaving the single market, so we wouldn't necessarily have the same sort of freedoms that Norway has. But I don't know if she'd capitulate at any point. I mean, I think there's space for her to capitulate over the customs union just because of Ireland. I think that could change down the line, but I'm not entirely sure with the single market. Cameron says Why should the Northern Ireland tail wag the British bulldog? That's a good point. Northern Ireland will be sorted. She said Ireland, the EU, and the UK will get around the table and sort it out. Well, I hope they do, because it's like the Northern Irish like Storm one, isn't it? Where they are trying to broker a deal, like a power sharing deal that they still haven't managed to do. Like, if they can't manage to sort themselves out, then how on earth are they going to come to an agreement regarding Brexit? I mean, it's just like it's mind blowing to even like get my head around the fact that they're just not doing a very good job. Jacob Rees-Mogg destroyed Subaru in Parliament. I did see that. Better than Labour's fantasy Brexit that's been blown out of the water. Well, I mean, as I said, like Labour's not in power at the moment, so they don't necessarily need to have like a point by point I did written down idea of what Brexit they want, which I'm sure they do. James Fielding says Theresa May is on March tomorrow. Well, that would be car crash television, won't it?
Oh, you know, I have to say it is rather painful to see Theresa May in any form of social interaction.
Yeah,
at
it
all.
really is. It's both painful and funny, I think, because it's just like it's so obvious she can't handle like just having a conversation with someone on like where you're not talking about, you know, politics or being in parliament, because I bet she surrounds herself with people quite like during the working hours where she's got like a lot of political business media folk in where she has to be quite diplomatic and stuff, so she's probably good at that bit, but when it comes to actually being a people person and like just talking on like a social level to people, like, and having to answer questions in front of like cameras and stuff, she's really bad at it. Just terrible.
Yeah, I know. And the thing is that's why, I mean, I know that there was not really many other options at that point when she, let's face it, became PM by default. But it was like, that's why she was always a really kind of a really bad choice from that perspective. And like, if you had to try and sell her on the campaign trail, it's why this whole strong and stable leadership, although she's the Iron Lady and number two and all this, it was
Brexit
so
means
obviously
Brexit.
yeah, it was so obviously not her personality. So it's like they sort of dug their own grave there, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, I remember people saying in the during the Tory party conference where that was obviously a complete disaster, where you had like the letters falling off the wall and the coughing
That was,
fit
it
and
wasn't her
stuff.
fault though, but
I
like
know, like I said like, oh, I feel sorry for her on a personal level, but like on a political level, like your decision making is just atrocious. So I don't feel sorry for you.
Yeah, like that was a real downer, actually, wasn't it? I have to admit that was like, I was so kind of like, oh god, like, when is this going to be over? It was so painful to watch.
Yeah. Yeah, she's not a people person, is she? So that should be interesting to watch tomorrow. Cameron says, "Oh God, the chat's just gone all over the place. I've lost where."
Ooh, yeah, carry on reading them out. Oh, sorry if you hear random noises. I'm trying to like do a bit of makeup in the background because I look like death since I've got this
Okay.
thing. Excuse me.
Philip Mason says, "Okay, ECJ regulations for the EU institutions we join, fine by me." Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I agree too. Luke Warner says government needs to get rid of ECC Act of 1972. I can't remember what that was.
What was this?
The ECC agreement.
You mean that was that not when the ECC, not the EEC?
That's probably it.
European Economic Community that was formed in the 70s, right?
I did know that, but I'd just briefly forgotten.
No.
Sorry, where am I? Jack James says, I support the 5-star movement and how they take on money in politics. However, they seem to be inefficient in how they run. Oh, are you referring to the party in Italy?
In Italy, yeah, the populist Eurosceptic party.
Yeah. Are they a socialist party or are they a right-wing party?
They're called Big Tent, so they don't exclude anyone, but technically I think they're left-wing populist.
Okay. Because I have seen bits and pieces of them on the news. So it'd be good to see how that pans out if they're or a sort of fairly centrist lefty party.
Yeah, I think they're sort of inclusive, like, but they seem a little bit. Well, it's like Jack James was saying, they're a little bit sort of chaotic in the way they're run. It seems like there's something sort of, I don't know. I just can't see it sort of being coherent enough and organised enough to run in its current form. I don't know.
Yeah.
And it also is really smacks of just tons of disillusionment. Like, people follow it because, you know, it's something a little bit new and people are dissatisfied and annoyed with things. And and like I said, people sort of then look for answers in things. And I'm not convinced that particular party in its current form will give them the answers that they're looking for.
Yeah, that's true. I think Europe especially is on this sort of weird sort of populist wave.
We were a bit. I mean, with the whole, I think I'd say that Brexit was partly to do with that, actually.
Yeah.
If I'm honest.
Oh yeah, for sure. And you know, with the whole French election with like Marine Le Pen and in
Wilders in Holland as well.
Yeah, exactly.
AFD in Germany.
Yeah, I mean, like, it's interesting how all of these parties who get in or get close to getting in are considerably right wing, as opposed to like democratic socialist parties who arguably have a lot more positive things to offer economically for their each of their countries. And it sort of baffles me a little bit as to why they don't vote the other way instead of voting, because it's sort of like two extremes, isn't it? It's either like voting left or right, and a lot of this is right-wing populism that's arguably gotten a bit out of control.
Yeah, like, I mean, because what happens is, obviously, when people are dissatisfied, that tends to lead to populist politics, or at least a rise in popularity of populist politics as a general rule. But more so right-wing populism, because they're opportunistic really, really badly. They're constantly looking for because they're all basically always a bit like rats under the floorboards. Like, they're always there. They're just waiting for the right time to come running out, you know?
Yeah.
And so once there's the dissatisfaction and people who obviously are annoyed by the status quo and want change, then is their chance to kind of strike while the iron's hot, so to speak.
Yeah.
So
that's a good point, actually, because I think the difference between right wing and left wing, and I hate that we are having to label everything these days, but
I know, yeah.
Right wingers are quite good at being a lot more aggressive, and like, if they want something, then they'll damn right go out of their way and get it, even if it means being violent. And in many cases, the right wingers will, as we're seeing in America, condone violence if it means that they get something that they want out of it. If whether it's like propaganda or reasons to strike out and do something as a result of something happening. And if you compare it with the left wing, they're a lot more like, oh, we should talk about it and sit down and be diplomatic and be peaceful protests, and all the rest of it, and they're a lot less likely to be violent. And if they are violent, then they get slapped down by right wingers for being violent. It's like, how dare you? Look at you, you're being violent. Oh my God. Like you're usually very peaceful, and oh, why are you doing this? It's like, ah,
I mean,
I think
yeah,
that's where they struggle in a lot of places.
I do feel like there are obviously groups that would view themselves as left wing that are quite aggressive and maybe also into kind of violence or like protests which end up as violence. That does happen on both sides, I have to admit. I mean, look at the Antifa rallies and things like that.
Yeah,
It's not at all pleasant.
yeah. Well,
But I
those are
really,
exceptions, aren't they?
no, they're exceptions to the rule. But then so are far right groups, to the point of where they go around like abusing people and assaulting people and stuff. That's still sort of a minority, but I do feel like they are very opportunistic when it comes to, like, Marine Le Pen, for example. She was not going to stick up for workers' rights. It was never. I
No,
had a hope in hell she was going to stick up
definitely
for
not.
workers' rights. I mean, whilst it was funny because whilst I was in France quite a lot towards the election, all of her posters, she was trying to soften the the Front National, so the National Front. She was trying to soften their image so much, so it was all, and she's quite an attractive woman, for her age and stuff, and
Yeah.
she was done up all nicely on the poster, and it was all her posters said was like Marine Présidente, and it didn't even mention the name of the party, and she was really trying to make it more inclusive. She was trying to drop the racist, nasty, fascist almost undertones of the party under her dad, and
Yeah.
you could so tell that she was trying to distance herself from it. And I thought to myself, there is no way that this is it doesn't matter how many nice posters she's got out. The fact that people would swallow her as being sort of person of the people, it's a bit like Donald Trump and his fucking
Yeah.
ridiculous gold-plated everything. I
I
mean,
was about to say that.
true
Yeah.
man of the people, standing there like shaking Farage's hand in
Oh
front of a gold-plated lift in
God.
Trump Tower.
Yeah. I
Please.
mean, like, I think Trump is a lot more brazen about it than like other politicians are. I think a lot of his rhetoric is very empty because he obviously isn't educated and doesn't have a clue about politics and like the ins and outs of like how, like, he talks about, I know how to make trade deals and stuff. Like, well, you don't really, because I mean, like, it's just laughable, like how he deals with like world leaders and that weird handshake that he has with people. It's like, I'm trying to cut you. I'm trying to cut you really hard. Like,
I can't. I just can't. Like my nuclear button is bigger than yours and stuff.
yeah. Oh my God. I mean, like, how are we allowing him to like get away with all of this? It's just like, what? What?
It's absolutely hilarious, I think. I mean, it's not. It's really terrifying, but it is hilarious at the same time.
Yeah, that's true. It's just, oh, for God's sake. I mean, I'm quite glad that like um I mean, like, our version of like, say, like the Conservative Party in this country would probably be like not even like the Democrats in America, like the state. You probably couldn't even compare, because I think the Conservatives, if you were to like put the Conservatives on a spectrum in the US, they'd be probably a bit to the left of the Democrats, which is
Oh,
weird because they're still a right-wing party, but in America, both the Democrats and the Republicans are on the right side of the spectrum.
yeah.
It's
I mean,
weird, isn't it?
like you do have obviously left wing Democrats, but yeah, as a party overall, they're so entrenched in the corporate side
Yeah.
that I think that there's absolutely no escaping it really at this point. You do have individuals, obviously Bernie Sanders being one. I mean, I know he's independent
Yeah.
now, but he runs
Yeah.
on a Democratic ticket. Um,
Yeah.
and a few of the others, but you're right that people have said you could basically fit the whole of the spectrum of UK politics into the Democratic Party.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And like, also, their whole their attitude to gun laws is insane. I don't like, if you take like the rest of the planet like they have nowhere near the amount of gun violence that the America has. I mean, the amount of gun deaths related to guns in America every year is like above 30,000.
Yeah,
So
oh, I know.
that's like a war zone, isn't it? And
Yeah.
the idea that the solution to like school shootings is to have more guns and to allow teachers to have guns in schools.
Yeah, because if there's one thing that can beat a bad guy with a gun, it's a good guy with a gun, right?
I just don't I don't understand, like no one else in the world has this same problem on this level.
No, I know.
And I don't get how, other than like obviously corporate bribery and like by the NRA, like obviously they've got a huge amount of influence and power over the like Congress and US
Yeah.
government. But it's just like, where's the common sense?
Well, I mean, look, this is the one stat which I thought was brought it home excellently. I mean, not that it's a stat actually which you can sort of, laugh at and say what a bunch of idiots, because it's horrifying. But like when I learned that there was more deaths per year by toddlers accidentally getting their hands on guns and shooting people than jihadist terrorism. I was like, well,
Yeah.
you've got a problem,
Yeah,
right? When you're getting shot up
exactly.
more by toddlers in your own country than jihadist terrorists. Like,
Exactly.
what the hell is wrong?
It's ridiculous. I think it's like their whole Second Amendment thing where they completely miss out the bit about a well-regulated militia and the idea of when it was written in like the 18th century, when the only sort of firearm that existed was a musket that you could like had to reload, and it took you ages to actually reload it. And
Mm.
also, back then when the America didn't actually have an army of its own and was under threat of by this country of being reinvaded again.
Mm.
Um, then I understand like the anxieties for wanting to have like small bands of armed folk, who like wanted to get rid of like enemies or wherever.
Yeah.
But now it's like on a completely different scale. Like nobody needs an AR-15 to protect themselves.
No,
Like
I know.
nobody. You don't need an automatic weapon. Like the whole purpose of a semi-automatic rifle is to do as much damage
Damage.
in as short as time as possible.
Yeah.
Like nobody need that. Like you don't need to give that to teenagers.
Well, yeah, or to anyone for that matter. And as we've seen, it happens to be that people who have a really, really quite severe mental health history are able to get their hands on weapons like that with relative ease. And now that is really, really terrifying. But it's a
Mm.
bit like I don't understand. Um, it's unfathomable for us, say, as a country, to be like, right, I'm just going to nip to Waitrose. I'm going to take my wallet, my
And
keys,
my gun.
my mobile phone, my lipstick, and my automatic weapon. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, it sounds crazy, but then if you talk to people in America, they'll be like, "What do you mean? My gun is like, I don't know."
it's my right and my freedom and stuff. And it's like,
Yeah, I was like, "Oh God."
that's fair enough, but
I think
can't
that
you like see the obvious like flaw in that?
no, well they don't, and like I just think the NRA has just too much power, and
Yeah,
they're a
but they're
crazy
also right
country.
in there with the governments, aren't they?
Yeah, yeah,
So,
exactly. And
so
like I think Donald Trump received about 30 odd million pounds for his campaign
campaign.
from
Yeah.
them. So yeah. Um, I am probably going to finish this chat up in the next 15 minutes or so. Um, so I'm going to get through some of the
Yeah,
comments in the chat.
yeah, carry on,
Um,
because I think we've been ignoring them for a while.
yeah. So where did we get to? Oh,
We probably still got some left from the other topic we were
yeah.
taking.
Um, okay. Let's start with Luke's comment. I would want Britain to break away from every single EU institution.
That's not what Theresa May put across, though, was it?
No, not really. I mean, she said let's break away from some, but not all.
But not all, yeah.
And then we should pay into being members of certain
things.
agencies, but because I think that's important.
Mm.
Cameron says, I hope the 5-star movement succeeds. In reply to your comment, I think, Angels.
Yeah.
Jack James says, it seems that there are policies they advocate that has 80% support, but they can still get it on their platform. There's something wrong with how that party is. I think that is in reference to the 5-star movement in Italy. Yeah. Luke says, I can't even stand to watch her. It's so painful to think that she's the leader of the United Kingdom.
Theresa May.
Theresa May is just, she's just awful.
Having said that, I find out the alternatives dire. So I'm not really, for me, it's like, what to do?
I just can't fathom the idea of either Jacob Rees-Mogg or Boris Johnson being leader.
None of them. None of them.
And just they're so awful. It's like you can't polish a turd, can you? Philip Mason says May is becoming more confident. I think she'll have a great time on Mar. I think when she knows what she wants to say and she's got it in front of her of what she wants to say, then she is confident. But then when she's getting asked questions and she's got like nothing in front of her and she has to literally think on her feet, then that's where I think she falls down. So sorry to say.
I think it might be a bit of a car crash, but we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see, and then laugh afterwards. Cam says Theresa May should just go. She's a worse negotiator than Neville Chamberlain. Is it that bad, really, that you can't even negotiate with Hitler?
Yeah.
Philip Mason says she was telling jokes at a recent press awards bash. Good for her.
Well, at least she can take the piss out of herself.
I'd love to hear Theresa May tell a joke.
Oh God, I would. I don't know whether I would.
I wonder if can I relate to that joke in any way, or is it something just that your clique of people will only get?
I mean, I also think that she'd probably fluff like the punchline and make it really awkward, so people would like stand there with their sort of
and
free
champagne, fake laugh, like that's funny.
Yeah.
Cam says the main reason why the Tories are in power now was the coup against Corbyn, and this is why I'll never forgive the Blairites and the Labour Party. To an extent, I agree. In the last election last year, that was especially poignant in that if people like Stephen Kinnock and like Ruth Cadbury and all of those people and Sarah Champion, all of those would have gotten behind him as they should have done, rather than just be like, well, I'm sorry, I didn't vote for him, so I promise we'll get him out when, like, as and when. Like, you shouldn't say that to like voters, because that's what they were doing on like doorsteps when they were canvassing. They were literally saying to voters, oh, I'm sorry about our leader, we'll try and get him out soon because I know that you don't like him. You shouldn't be saying that, like, to be honest. And I think that's a big reason why they didn't win. But I'm prepared to put that aside.
I think it's necessary to put it aside, because otherwise they won't ever win. But like, I actually disagree with that. I don't think it was. I mean, it might have had an impact, but I think the main reason why the Conservatives are in power is the collapse of the UKIP vote, which we know that some went to Labour, but many more went to the Conservatives. Was the fact that the Conservative vote share went up. And basically because of Brexit. I think that's the only reason why they're in power.
Yeah, well, I think it was weakness on Labour's part for not getting behind Jeremy, and also a lot of things to do with Brexit, and as you said, like the drop in the UKIP vote share, etc. Whereas that's probably the biggest reason. So Luke says she is no prime minister. I can tell you that. Cam says the coup led to Labour dropping drastically from the polls. I think they're at the moment Labour and Conservatives are still pretty much neck and neck. I haven't really seen it change very much in the past.
No, it hasn't.
year.
Labour are ahead by something irrelevant, like 1 point or 2 points at this point. But I mean, I'm shocked that they're not. Even though I'm not a fan and won't be voting for them, but
No.
I'm just surprised because this government is just like, it's so unbelievable that you'd almost expect them to be buried by anything.
Yeah, I do. It's probably because I spend most of my time in an echo chamber, but I don't understand why people would still vote for this party. It's just a shambles.
Oh well, it's an obvious shambles. But I know many Conservative voters who concede that they can't disagree. It's true.
What, so would they still continue to vote Conservative?
No,
Or...
well, a lot of the Conservatives I know around here are happy to vote Lib Dem. Well, James Fielding is one of those ones, actually, who we were discussing this the other day. Even though he's a Brexiter, if Brexit looks like it's going to be a total and utter pig's ear anyway, and just to make a statement, if you want to get the Conservative out near you, James, I'd just vote Lib Dem anyway.
Yeah, that's actually, like, I think that was a good idea when they were doing that during the election campaigns. I think Momentum did this as well, where it's like your nearest marginal, or like how to get the Tories out of your constituency, and like who to vote for and stuff. I think that was quite like tactical voting. I think that was quite a good move. Good PR move. Phil says, I think the EC agreement becomes void with Brexit. I have to admit, I don't really know much about the European economic.
I'm gonna withhold judgment on that. He might be right, but I'm gonna withhold judgment on that until the final deal, because I'm not quite sure what bits they're gonna tweak.
Okay.
You know?
Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll wait and see. Kick Corbyn out, Cameron, and put a centrist in. You might have a chance then. No,
I think that's half the problem, actually. I think that things have become much more polarized, but I think you'd get away with one that's stomachable for the Blairites and for the left wingers.
Yeah. So if you had like a character that was sort of not too left wing but not a centrist either, so sort of sat in the middle.
Yeah, and he was quite charismatic, and because remember, some voters as well are so ridiculously shallow. Like, you just put someone who looks good in a sort of smartish suit, and they come across well and stuff, and they'd get the vote anyway, just because they're anything but the government.
Exactly. I mean, I think a lot of vox pops that you get of like asking people in the street who would you vote for, and it's like, oh, she seems like a nice person. It's like,
yeah, exactly. That's my point. Yeah,
like, okay. I think it sort of justifies people's points that are like, you know, when Sty says like a lot of the electorate just are quite
absolute
dumb.
bunch of fucking idiots. That's what that's his exact wording. I wouldn't put it quite like that, to be fair, but I do think that there are people who just don't have time or aren't interested in politics, or, you know, they're just busy.
That's fine though. Like, there's nothing against that, but I think it's important to keep yourself informed, especially. I mean, you don't have to do it all the time, like, but when it's an election, I think it's your moral. It's like part of your obligation as a voter to get yourself clued up on who to vote for, and like why.
Exactly. Like even if you disagree with other people on it, it's like if these are actual policies which affect your healthcare system and your education system and will directly affect your family and friends and things, and it's definitely, of course, worthwhile being clued up on things.
Yeah, for sure. Cam says, I think the last election proved that Corbyn can do well on a hard left platform. Exactly. And like, I know that a lot of older Labour voters don't like Corbyn for that reason, but he brought in a hell of a lot of the young vote. So for that like reason, I think there's a lot of truck for going forward on that basis, because there's only going to be more of them, like people who were like 16 and 17, like during the referendum and during the last election, who are going to like come of age now, are going to be those voters. So it can only get better, to quote a Blairite.
The song by Dee Ream. I'm actually old enough to remember that. Sorry about the clattering, by the way. I'm like wandering around, taking the laptop with me.
But yeah, I there was a video that Jeremy Corbyn made. I think when he was responding to the media smears about him, because I think he did it specifically. Like I think he'd reached a point where it was like, I've had enough of this. Like I'm just gonna make a video and tell them to like just, here's my side of the story and tell them it's not true. And then he ended by saying, change is coming, and with the like a little cheeky grin on his face, like, yep, damn straight. And like, there ain't nothing you can do to stop it.
Well, I think as well that that even excuse me, even Corbyn skeptics such as myself know that those smears are such BS. It's like
it's desperation, isn't it?
It really does. It stinks of desperation. Yeah, it does. But desperation only comes if somebody poses a threat. So you've got the likes of Murdoch and stuff that's clearly shitting themselves.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's quite funny actually watching, because I was in the other week I was in Tesco, and I always, like, as I'm leaving, make a point of looking at all their headlines, because they're all like sat next to each other, right? And so I was looking at the Daily Mail, and it was like another Corbyn smear. And there was a lady who she was like, oh, I don't know why I bother reading this. It's just a load of rubbish, isn't it? And I was like, yeah.
Well, apparently it does really well amongst I think that like isn't it aimed for, or one of their major demographics is something like late middle-aged housewives. Is apparently the Mail does really, really well amongst, which is quite specific, isn't it? Like late middle-aged housewives.
It's probably because oh wow, it's just like a cheap paper, isn't it? They can just like, it's quite easy to read, and I could see why it would have an appeal for.
And actually, I suppose the age thing, because amongst, obviously, as we know, newspapers are sort of dying out because of online news anyway, and many people under the age of, say, well, even a bit older than me, so like say late 30s, 40 and below, are much more likely to get their news online nowadays anyway. So by default, papers are probably read largely by older people anyway.
Oh yeah. Well, my grandparents, every time I went over to their house, always had the Observer. I don't know if that's like a right wing or a left wing, or I think
the Observer is the Sunday Guardian.
Oh, is it?
Yeah,
oh, I never knew that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's basically like, but it's very, very moderate. I'd say it's even more so. It's like the Guardian's not left wing. I always laugh when people try and tell me that the Guardian's left wing. It's not at all.
It's relatively moderate, isn't it?
Yeah, it's centrist really, and they also have the thing that I like about the Guardian as well is that they have many independent writers for them. So like you'll find that they have a lot of right wingers writing for them, as well as lefties, as well as centrists, as well as sort of authors, politicians, historians. You know, even like chefs and things. Like their content is good. I quite like you sort of, even though you pay a bit more for it, I think the content is.
I've seen Grace Dent write a few columns for them a few times.
Yeah.
Every time she goes to a restaurant and just has to complain about something. That's quite funny. Yeah. Let's just finish off with these comments, because people have been quite vocal.
Yeah, they've all been quite. I quite like the fact when people take part a lot in the comments.
Yeah. I've just lost my place.
Don't I do that all the time?
Sorry.
No, don't worry.
Okay, I'm just going to pick somewhere and go from there.
Okay.
So Mason says the rise of the far right in Europe can be directly placed at Merkel's immigration policies.
I don't think it's just that. I think it's decades of neoliberalism as an overall thing, to be honest with you. I don't think it's purely immigration, although that will factor into it. I don't think it's the sole thing. I think people were just getting annoyed with relatively centrist politics, and there seems to be this wave of wanting change regardless. I don't know whether that's purely, in fact, it isn't purely to do with immigration. It's to do with other things, with wages or with sort of living costs and with I'd say lots of different aspects.
Yeah, I think, as you say, like living standards are going downhill, so I think people expect change, but I think they sort of they get taken advantage of, like the voters, and they get told to vote specific ways, and then they get misled, and yeah, it's a slippery slope. So I think things need to change for sure. Cameron says, I think Dennis Skinner would be a great leader of Labour. I love Dennis Skinner. I think he's great.
Bloody hell, he'd be quite like controversial though, wouldn't he? Could you imagine?
Yeah, I think he'd be sort of like, because he's one of like the old guys. He's been there for years, hasn't he? He's been like the MP for Bolsover
since the 70s, since something like 74 or something, 74 or 75, and he's now like 86 or 87 years old or something, isn't he?
God love him. Jack James says Skinner in his youth would have taken the North, no questions asked. Cam says, I think some of the Blairites are planning another leadership challenge. I think Chuka Umunna might challenge Corbyn if this happens. God, I hope not. I mean, I'd like to think that last year's election sort of brought the Labour Party more together as opposed to driving them apart. I mean, if the Blairites, like, because there's been 2 leadership challenges already in the past 2 years, so if they want to do another one, like, why not just create a new centrist party, as far as I'm concerned? Because like people like Jeremy Corbyn for a reason. So I mean, if you're going to have another leadership challenge, you're just going to create more division, aren't you?
Yeah, I mean, if there was a new centrist party made up, I'm not sure that would be particularly helpful either, because
you're splitting the vote, aren't you?
But I mean, and if you make a centrist party, you're more likely to split. Although, are you? I was going to say, because I think you've got quite a lot of moderate conservatives who hate this sort of UKIP-y stance and don't like that particular wing of the Conservative Party either. So whilst you have the Blairites on one end, you may well also have the likes of the Subris and sort of what I would call the Cameron-esque type wing, probably being far more likely to be in a centrist party than in a right-wing Tory party led by Mog or something.
That's a good point, actually. Take the polls with a pinch of salt. It's no coincidence that the same people who were behind the coup are badgering Corbyn about the single market.
Yeah.
I'm trying to zip through these comments. Yeah, I've heard a couple of big players are making moves again to try and force Labour's Brexit position. Luke says, I've always been fascinated with politics. Well, that's why we're here. Jack James said it would be suicide if they do, though. Yeah, I think Labour's stance at the moment is okay. I think they've got a good balancing act in terms of what they said about the customs union with regard to the whole like Northern Irish thing, like as we've talked about. So I think they've postured quite well as far as that issue is concerned.
Yeah.
So Cam says some of these Blairites had said that they would rather see Labour lose than to have Corbyn as PM. I noticed that, yeah. I mean, like the way they acted in the last election, it sort of it was almost as if they wanted to lose and they were expecting to lose because of Corbyn, but it went completely the other way. So yeah, I'm quite glad about that. He also says sorry, go on.
Yeah, I just quickly wanted to add to that. I think it was quite staggering because people say, well, Labour still lost the election, which of course they did. But if you can believe the polls, and that's a big if, pretty sure we can all agree on that. But if you can believe the polls, if he indeed did start, but from 21 points behind, that is a staggering makeup. Within that campaign. So yeah, I think everyone was really staggered. Well, you saw The Summer That Changed Everything, that documentary, right?
Yes. Yeah,
did you see the look on their faces when
it was amazing? They
were
staggered. Like, oh my
by
god! Oh my god! I can't believe it. was like, yeah, well, you probably would have done even better if you decided that you were going to stick up for Jeremy, and you probably
Yeah.
might have done a little bit better. But no,
I
that's just
know.
the way the cookie crumbles, isn't it?
Yeah.
Some of Corbyn's long life friends, such as Galloway, had said that the only reason that they haven't been deselected is because of Corbyn is too forgiving for his own good. Yeah, I think he's a good person. He's very principled. But I think they were also saying in that Labour documentary about momentum and how they were having possibly a little. They were sort of asserting their power a bit too much over the Labour Party in terms of trying to get rid of like the centrist Blairites in favour of like the more left wing um side of the party.
Yeah.
So I think those were the people that were in danger of like deselecting people. I mean, like Momentum is turned into quite a radical part of the Labour Party, and I mean, I'm starting to like feel like the Momentum, like I don't know if they've got good or bad intentions. Um, I mean, like I'm sure they're trying to get Labour in as much as possible through their campaigning, etc. But so that can only be a good thing. But I think their methods are a little bit extreme, or can be a bit extreme. So I'm
I
a bit,
also think it's really counterproductive because it's almost like people now, for example, they've got their real hang-ups about the government because they're a split party and they're tearing each other's eyes out in certain areas over Europe and stuff. Nobody likes a split party. Like, it doesn't go down well amongst the electorate as a general rule. So if the electorate, for like the world to see, can see that Momentum are going through purging half of the moderates in the party, they're never going to attract those sort of floating voters ever in a
yeah,
million years.
that's true. I think
Be counterproductive.
that's where they fall down because they sort of in all their efforts to try and get the young vote, which is good, they're sort of starting to very much ignore like and isolate themselves from that slightly older voters, which is not very good.
No, exactly.
So much for wanting to be in power, huh? First past the post has to be abolished. Yeah, I think I'm in favour of proportionate PPR. Is that PR? Yeah, that's the
Yeah,
one.
yeah. I am as well, and there's different forms of it too. So there could definitely be a sort of a almost like a compromise form of it that I'm pretty sure people would go for, providing it was more representative. Because at the moment, for example, my vote's wasted in my constituency, completely wasted. I've never had my vote count ever in any election that I've ever voted in.
No, well, that's the same in my constituency where the Conservative vote is just through the roof. So even if I try and vote another way, it won't even get noticed, which is a shame. So it would be nice to like actually have a vote and have it like make a difference. As you said, Cam says they want us to remain neoliberal and to have a paper thin difference between the two parties. Jack James says, I think Corbyn knows that technically they could run as independents and kill Labour, aka Social Democratic Party style. I'm not sure. Cameron says, yes, how often do independents win? I think what he means. Yeah. Not very often, if at all. Yeah, I mean that just goes to show how divisive and like polarized our politics has become in this country. I mean, like if you're not going to vote Conservative, like you pretty much have to vote Labour for like if you
Unless
don't want
you're
to.
in obviously one of those seats which is like a Lib Dem Tory marginal or something.
Yeah, obviously, yeah. Or if you're in Brighton, then vote Green.
Then vote Green.
Voting Green. Yeah. The Guardian is Blairite. Don't think it is. I think well, as we talked about, it's like quite centrist, isn't it? It likes to remain balanced. They rarely win, but it would be enough to split the vote. Okay. James says 30 years since the Lib Dems have been created, and started on 6% and are now at 7%, slow and steady and all that. Yeah, I mean, like I have seen on a Britain Elect's Twitter account that Lib Dem are receiving more and more of the vote share. I mean, like it's obviously not a lot, but their percentage of votes is slowly going up in some places, which is good.
Yeah, someone sent me, I think it was you, Phil. Was it you? You sent me a thing whereby the other parties didn't really go up or down much in the local election. I mean, I know local elections are not necessarily indicative of like the national result, but you know, there's something to be said when the Lib Dems get something like, in some of the local by-elections, they swept something like 4 or 5 seats directly off the Conservatives. And I thought, oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna have to wrap this up fairly soon.
Yeah, that's fine. I need to nip off as well because I've got to do some shopping yet. So
yeah, I'm sorry I haven't been. I probably not gonna be able to read everyone's comments out, but yeah, I hope everyone enjoyed today's stream. And thanks, Angels, for joining me and allowing me to stop talking to myself for like
sorry, I
3
was
hours
so
straight.
fashionably late. It's
No,
so my fault.
fine. It's fine. Hopefully, well, I'll try and be on Swiss's channel tomorrow. I'm not sure if I'll be out. But yeah, thanks a lot for everyone in the comments for joining and contributing. It's always good to hear from you. Don't forget to subscribe to either of our channels, Road Doggers Politics and Angels as well, because I know obviously I make a lot of content.
Yep. Whereas mine tends to be just last minute, but we do sometimes do chats on my channel last minute. So if you want to subscribe to me, feel free. I'll stick a link in the side, or if you want to stick a link in the side chat.
Oh, of your channel.
Yeah, just give me a sec. I'll just send you the link. I'll send it to you on Messenger because I don't think I'm a mod on here, am I?
No.
Okay, one sec.
That's something that I should do something about, actually.
Looks all right. Don't worry for the moment. I'll send it to your Messenger, and then you can just link it in the side chat.
Okay. But yeah, cheers, guys, for having a great discussion today. It's been really good. And just bear with me. I'm just copying and pasting your thing. There you go. So that's Angel's channel in the side chat if anyone wants to go and sub to her. Yeah, and don't forget, for those of you who are sub to Swiss's channel, to come and see us tomorrow afternoon at some point, as I'm sure he will also be streaming.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks for having me, Ro. And cheers, guys, in the side chat, and I will speak to you later.
Awesome. Cheers, guys.
Bye.
Bye.